Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the webinar on getting Alberta products on the shelf. My name is Dolores Serafin, and I work for Alberta Agriculture and Irrigation with the Food and Bioprocessing branch. I will be your host for today's webinar. During this webinar, you will learn that success for many in the food and beverage industry includes getting your products on the shelf in retail. A great product is only part of what is required. Food processors need to understand what retailers are looking for and what they will be doing to create demand and deliver the sales required to stay on the shelf. Some key takeaways you will get today are an overview of the industry as we grapple with input supply challenges and inflation, a strategy to price your products based on the category where you compete, definitions for all of the components of trade spend and marketing spend to ensure your product has the best chance at success, and a glossary of industry terms so you are speaking the same language as your customers. This webinar is being recorded and the link will be sent to you in an email after the live webinar. Our webinar today is scheduled for 2.5 hours. There will be plenty of time for you to ask questions, and Peter is definitely going to make you do just a little bit of work during this webinar answering his poll questions and some other fun stuff. Something you definitely want to know about today is where the Q&A button is, or the chat button. Peter will be asking some questions, and the first one to reply with the correct answer will win a prize. The button is on the top of your screen. Make sure you know where it is. Our speaker today is Peter Chapman with SKU Food. Peter not only understands the food industry, he has a passion for seeing others succeed in this business, sharing his in-depth knowledge of the retail landscape and consumers with food producers and food processors who want to grow their sales. His valuable insights will help you navigate the marketplace more effectively and get your items into the shopping cart of the consumer more often. Peter's extensive experience includes product development, building relationships throughout the supply chain, and retail merchandising. Starting at the store level, he learned the importance of listening to the consumer and the challenges of implementing strategies at retail. He went on to Canada's largest food retailer, Loblaws, for nearly 20 years, expanding his knowledge working in various departments, including merchandising, marketing, advertising, and real estate. In 2008, Peter started a company to provide customized services to producers, processors, and retailers across Canada and in the US who want to increase their sales. Peter works directly with producers and processors to help them understand how to get their product on the shelf and into the shopping cart. I will now hand it over to Peter to lead us on this learning journey.
Thanks very much, Dolores, and really a privilege to be here today with everybody. I'm coming to you from Halifax. It's kind of a blustery day here today. We've had a lot of wind, but I know complaining about the weather when you live in Halifax, when I'm talking to people who are mostly in Alberta, who've been dealing with much colder temperatures than we're used to here, I won't complain about it, but it is kind of a blustery, rainy kind of day here in the Maritimes. So great to be with you and have the opportunity to speak to you virtually. Certainly feel free if you want to put in the chat just you know who you are and where you're coming to us from. It's always interesting for me to get a sense of who's here with us, and you know, perhaps some of you I know from different things where our paths have crossed before, which would be awesome. And for those of you who I haven't met, great to meet you online, and maybe someday we'll be able to see you in person as well. But obviously, after the last 2 or 3 years, we all do business a little differently, and getting more, you know, used to all the time speaking to people virtually and interacting that way. So, as Dolores said, we're going to do some interactive things today, which is always important, and we want it to be very much for you to get what you need out of this. And certainly, obviously, we prepared some content for you, and we're going to go through some things, but we definitely have time for questions, and encourage you to ask those questions, because it's we want to make sure that if there's things that are on your mind, ask those questions. And one of the things, sometimes when I'm talking, I get going and start using some industry terms and things. So if there's something that you're not clear about, you can always ask that question as well. You know, what's he talking about, DSD or something like that? And as Dolores mentioned in one of the takeaways, we have a great glossary of food and beverage industry terms for you that's a great takeaway for you to be able to use in your business. So you watch for that partway through the presentation. There'll be a way for you to grab a hold of that, download it, and be able to use it in your business. So when it comes to getting products on the shelf, you know, there's so much work, and if you're a producer or processor, I'm sure that, you know, there's so much work goes into developing a product. You have a great idea, and then you have to start to figure out, okay, how do I produce this thing? How do I get it into a package and all these kind of things? And there's just so much work involved and investment, sometimes time, resources, money, all those kind of things to get it done. And unfortunately for people, that's not where the hard work ends. If you want to get your product on the shelf, then there's still more work. I hate to tell you, but we're going to give you the insights today. But there is more work that you have to do if you really want to be successful in this industry. And one of the things which I always want to share with people, and this is something that for me is so important, is that success in this industry is not just about making great products to sell, it's about selling the great products that you produce. And, you know, it's a lot of people have this sort of feeling that, okay, if I can produce the best pickles or the best bread or the best whatever, that it's going to guarantee success. And unfortunately, that's not true. It doesn't guarantee success. And we really have to put efforts into the selling part of our business. And it's a different kind of work doing the selling part of our business. And, you know, I was thinking back to one of my very first clients that I worked with was a dairy here in Nova Scotia. They've since been acquired by Agripur, but it was an independent dairy, and one of the dairy farmers actually had taken over as being president of the organization, and he worked in a dairy farm about probably, I don't know, 50 minutes from Halifax. So he would get up in the morning at 5 o'clock and do a little bit of work on the farm, get into the office, and do his sort of admin work and running the dairy, and then he would go home at night and spend probably in the summer months another couple hours or 3 hours in the field, either planting or harvesting or doing it, whatever. And I said to him one day, Ralph, why do you do that? Like, why are you so you know, you know, you're here every day, you're doing the work at the dairy, and then you're going home at night working in the farm. And he looked at me and he said, Peter, you know, I can sit here all day and try and figure out, you know, putting these strategies in place about sales and doing things like marketing and doing some of these things. But when I go home at night and spend 2 hours in the tractor, I can turn around and see what I've accomplished. Whereas that work on the sales and some of that kind of stuff, it takes so long for it to come to fruition. It's frustrating because I can't always see the progress I'm making. So it can be frustrating working on this, you know, getting it on the shelf piece of success in the food industry. So it's important to try to find some milestones as you go through this process as well that you can kind of celebrate, because it should be a celebration, but you know, sometimes it's tough to see the progress. Sometimes it's not as much like when you're doing product development. You can say, okay, we've got the right flavor, or we've got the right package, or we've got the right specs, or whatever it is. It's kind of like almost like no finish line sort of thing. You have to keep working at it all the time. So today, to talk about getting on the shelf, we're going to talk about relevance. And it's so important for producers and processors to have products that are relevant in today's market. And it doesn't mean it's what you want or perhaps what someone told you. It's relevant to the consumer. And then that leads us to the next section, which is really all about customer and consumer needs. And when I speak about relevance, if I go back to that for a second, I'm really talking about relevant with how a fast changing industry, and we're going to talk about some of those things. And then that customer and consumer needs piece, because you really have two stakeholders that you have to satisfy if you want to be successful. If you want to get on the shelf, you need to satisfy the customer, and that's the retailer or the distributor, one or the other, who's going to buy your product from you. They're the ones who issue that purchase order, pay you for your products. And then the consumer's got to need your product too. They've got to pull it off the shelf. So we're going to explore those two things, and then we're going to talk about that sales plan. And you see, it's your job as a supplier in the industry to make sure your product sells. Just because you get it on the shelf at Sobeys or Loblaw or Co-op or Safeway or an independent, it's not their job to sell your product, it's your job. And we're going to help you put that sales plan together so that when you go to the retailer and you say, look, we've got this great product and here's our plan to make sure it sells, then they're going to be much more likely to listen to you and entertain what you're looking for. So we're going to go through those three kind of key things as we go through the next sort of 2 hours, and I guess we've eaten into some of our time, but 2.5 hours today. So let's talk about relevance and how important it is to be relevant in a very fast changing industry. You know, I think our industry has changed more in the last 2 to 3 years than it did in the previous 10 to 15 because of obviously the pandemic and other things, market influences going on. So let's talk about some of the things going on in our industry. And I'm going to ask you in a moment just sort of a question about what you see happening, but I wanted to kind of just quickly cover some of the things that, you know, I think that most of you would agree with these things, you know, about challenging relationships with suppliers and retailers and e-commerce and demand for local. And we're going to dive into some of these things in a moment. Food inflation, obviously, plant-based, are also hard, you know, it's hard to make a profit as a supplier. But I also wanted to ask you what you think about some other issues going on, because I think from A to F, probably most people would say, yes, you know, I think those are things that we need to be aware of and we need to consider when we're talking about how to get on the shelf with our products. But if we could launch that first poll, Dolores, and we'll take a look at some of the other issues, we're really interested into some of the other things that you see happening in the industry and get your input on some of those things. So so we have a poll on there, so we really encourage you to vote. So I can read off those questions and give you a chance to have a look and see what you think. But what else do you see is happening in the industry? So do you see e-commerce as being a good opportunity for your products and the category that you're in? How about sustainability? You know, do you think that's something that we need to have our eye on and be addressing, whether it's through packaging or different influences? Do you think it's easier to get on the shelf with retailers now? Or is it more difficult? So if you think it's easier, then you can pick that one. And then also, do you see that there's more regulations to increase complexity? And things could be like food safety and some of those kind of things. Or do you see other issues going on? So check which ones you think are influencing and happening in our industry. And we're really interested to know what you think and what you're seeing out there, because it's important for us to understand that as we go through some of the things about how to stay relevant and get on the shelf. So Dolores, are you seeing people vote? Are we getting some input from people out there?
We absolutely are, Peter. We have 68% of the people online right now have voted. So we'll just give it a little bit more time. So those of you that are still thinking about it, make your decision, because I'll close it down here pretty quick. We're at a whopping 75%.
We must be more than the last election, Dolores.
Absolutely, we are. Totally, we are.
I'm not going into politics, though. I'm not doing that.
So yeah, we'll just give them about another 10 more seconds, you guys, to finish up, and then I'll close the poll here.
All right. Well, we appreciate you giving us our input, because it is important, and we want to know what people are thinking.
All right, I am going to share with you what we see.
All right.
That's what our answers were, everyone.
All right. So sustainability coming out the number one out of the list that we put together for you. So really, I guess about like 4 to 5 people saying that sustainability is important, and I think you're bang on. I think that it's definitely remained an issue, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. E-commerce, so 7 out of 10 people seeing e-commerce as being an opportunity, and certainly huge changes in that area in the last 2 to 3 years for food and beverage, especially. People were slow to adopt e-commerce in our industry, and so interesting to see how many of you think that. Wow, that's surprising given my background on the retail side, that only 14% of you think it's easier to get on the shelf with the retailers. I might argue that one a little bit with you. I think that the local programs are an opportunity. It's still not easy, there's no doubt, but maybe I didn't use the right word there, easier, but interesting how many, you know, only 14%, and more regulations increasing complexity, and I think that's something that we all have to be aware of, because if you want to get on the shelf, the retailers expect that you have done your homework and that your products are ready from a food safety point of view, that your labeling and your packaging is compliant with the regulatory things and stuff. So it's something that we all have to be aware of, and make sure that you either have the expertise or are able to find the expertise to be able to to make sure that you're compliant. So because the last thing you want to do is go through all the effort of getting on the shelf and then having an issue. So you have to be aware of those regulations. So thanks very much, Dolores, and we're going to keep flying through some of our content here. So let's talk about some of the things that we see happening in the industry and do a little bit of a deep dive. And as I said, you have to be relevant when you approach the retailer. So these are things that you should have built into the conversation about, you know, your product. They can't all be part of it, but there's certain things that are going to be more relevant than others. So for me, one of the biggest things that's happened recently is that the value of food has changed. You know, consumers are much more interested in where their food comes from. During the pandemic, when people went into stores and they saw empty shelves and they were like, what happened? What do you mean it's not automatic that these things just happen? You mean it doesn't all just flow through and be ready and I have thousands of items to choose from in my store? So, you know, it's really interesting to me that I think people are giving us more credit as an industry for what we do. I think they're more interested in what you do and how you do it, which leads to how important it is to tell your story and make sure that people do know some of the things that are going on in your business, and remember, related to them. But you want to make sure that how important it is to share with them, you know, where their food is coming from, and it's definitely something that I've seen changing. A huge thing about food inflation, and I know that that would be a hot topic if we had included that in the poll. I think everybody would agree that that's been impacting our industry. So hopefully you're making some steps in your business to try to, you know, we know cost increases and inputs have increased and that kind of thing, but hopefully we're starting to see a bit of a plateau and you can start to bring some stability to your pricing. And that's really my advice to people, is to try to bring stability to your pricing and not have to keep seeing things ratchet up. And also to be relevant to the retailers, you want to show them that, hey, I pushed back. I told my suppliers, you know what, I can't absorb that much of an increase, or we changed our process so that we would be able to keep our costs consistent and that kind of thing. So hopefully you're addressing some of those things in your business. If you notice, I have the chip category up there, and if you remember back, I guess it's almost a year ago now, which is, it's hard to believe how time goes by, but where Loblaw and Hostess got into a battle, right? Because Hostess wanted a price increase. Loblaw said no, or they said it's too much. We don't know. We weren't in the room. But they got to a point where Loblaw delisted Hostess from across the country on their shelves. And that's a pretty big move for a company, you know, for two big companies to come to that point where either Hostess said, you know what, we're walking away, or Loblaw said, you're out, whatever happened. But it's definitely shows kind of the level of the challenge to our industry in terms of inputs and costs going up, and retailers trying to hold prices and realize that if they go over a certain retail, they're afraid. You know, I mean, I know in our store last week, I just looked at chips because I'm curious to see what's going on with retails, and I think it was like $4.59 for a bag of chips, and some chips were over $5, and it just seems, you know, hard to fathom $5 for one bag. So so it's definitely an issue in the industry. Another big thing that we've seen that has happened is this shift from food service to retail during the whole COVID pandemic, and then back again to food service. And that, you know, we saw the numbers. I didn't put any numbers in here, but the reality is, prior to the pandemic, we were in Canada, we were probably about a 70-30, 70% of food sales in retail, 30% in food service. And then all of a sudden during the pandemic, we went to 85-15. So 85% of food being purchased in retailers, and 15%, only 15% at food service. And now I've seen some numbers from FCC that number has actually rebounded right back to where the trend line was. So food service is now back to 30%, and retail is back to about 70%. But that causes a huge, excuse me, challenge to everybody in the industry, because the onions that retailers want are not the same onions food service wants, or the the size, if you're producing a sauce or a soup or whatever it is, it's different packaging, it's different all the way around. So it's not exactly easy for people to make that switch. So that's caused a lot of challenge. And then the other thing it's going to do, as food service sales rebound, retailers, they got used to those sales. They want to keep them, and they don't like reporting negative sales, so or negative comparable sales. So we know they're going to be under a lot of pressure to keep driving sales. So you're going to hear about that. The whole buy local piece, and we know it's sort of on a national scale, buy Canadian, and then within the provinces, regions, different things, we see buy local programs. And it's definitely, consumers are saying to the retailers, I want these products. They want them. They've heard about them. They can get access to seeing them online now very easily. And during the pandemic, as we talked right off the top about the value of food, people are saying, you know what, I don't like that when I go in the store and see an empty shelf. And if you can get it from a local supplier, the chances should be better that you can get it because you don't have a logistics issue or that kind of thing. So people definitely want to see more local in their stores, and the retailers have responded. In the Alberta market, I had the privilege of doing some work with some different processors in Alberta, and I heard a lot about the Sobeys local program and the work that Gary does there to give the guidance and help products get to that point of retail shelf. And it's such a great opportunity when the retailers do give you some space, so that if you are a regional producer, processor, you have a chance to try out what's happening in retail and get on the shelf. And again, that's where all the selling work really comes into play once you get that opportunity. So we're going to dive into a lot of that on what you need to do. E-commerce, another thing that's really impacted our industry. Prior to the pandemic, and you mentioned it in our poll as well, a lot of you said you think it's a big opportunity in your business. Prior to the pandemic, e-commerce was probably about 3%. It's a hard number to really nail down in food and beverage because there are a lot of small players who might be doing things that don't get tracked. It doesn't get sort of recorded in terms of AC Nielsen or one of the big companies who track sort of sales data and share it with the industry. But when I talk to people within the industry, I would say that we've probably gone from, say, 3% up to 12 to 15%. And that includes what is purchased through the retailer's website. So if you go on to any one of the retailers who are doing e-commerce, the big retailers, whether it's Walmart or Loblaw or Sobeys, and you buy through their website, then that would get included in that 12 to 15% number. But it's definitely a different marketplace now, and consumers are more willing to buy food and beverage online. So we have to take that into account, and it could be a channel that's worth something for you. Another thing that's happened that you need to be aware of when you're trying to get on the shelf is the priorities of the retailers have changed. Service level is a really, really important thing. And we're going to talk a little bit about service level later and give you a definition for it. But service level is one of those things that is so important. The retailer needs the products when they want them, where they want them. And that's probably, it's always been important. I mean, during my time at Loblaw, service level was important, but it's now heightened. And the retailer's sort of rationale is, you know what, if you don't get my product to me when I need it, I'm going to lose sales. Or even worse, the consumer's going to leave my store and go across the street because they found, they had something on their list and they couldn't get it, so they're going to leave my store. So those are definitely problems for a retailer. So definitely an issue. Another thing that the retailers focus on, labor, big, everybody I think is talking about some of the struggles there. So the retailers are no different. We've also seen changes to the shopping basket. So a lot of people switching and not 100% switch, but incorporating more plant-based protein into their diet. And so that's something that we see in shelf space at the store. So that influences the shopping basket. We're seeing more and more people looking for products that, kind of that term sort of check boxes for them. So if they're looking for something that's gluten-free or lactose-free or non-GMO or whatever it is, they're kind of looking for some of those things on the front of the package and saying, okay, is it or isn't it? And that impacts the shopping basket. So we have to be aware of some of those things. And sometimes that's an opportunity in a category, or sometimes it's if you're the third person to the table with a gluten-free product in a category, they may go, we don't need any more. We're sort of tapped out there. We have enough. What else have you got? So you have to be aware of what's going on with the shopping basket. Another thing we've seen recently, which can create a great opportunity for people, is we're seeing a lot more millennials shopping in the grocery stores. So this was the generation who were much more likely to support food service and would be eating out probably more often than other generations. And when food service really was impacted during the pandemic, these people went to the grocery stores much more than they did before. So that can be a great opportunity for companies whose products perhaps your product is something that's almost ready, ready to heat or something like that. And these consumers would be willing to look at that. They like to put their own finishing touches on it though. So you might give them a choice of 2 or 3 sauces or something like that. And then that's what they're looking for. So millennials shopping in the stores, definitely changing the mix for the retailer in how they're trying to appeal to consumers. And also sustainability. You mentioned it in the poll. That was the one that I think got the most votes in the poll. And I agree with you. I think that it is definitely still a big issue going on out there. And if you had asked me partway into the pandemic, if you'd said, Peter, sustainability, is it going to make it, is it going to still be a top priority as we go through these really tough, difficult, changing times? I might have said that I thought it might wane a little bit. And I would have been wrong. Sustainability has stayed as an important issue in our industry. I think consumers are demanding it and the regulators are demanding it, which means that the other members of the value chain have to accept that and come to the table. And for me, in sustainability in our industry, I think you need to look at 3 different buckets. And that's why I've got 3 photos there. The first one being sort of your environmental footprint and what are the things you can do within your business to reduce that environmental impact, whether it's through logistics or your process or something. I put the picture of Sobeys getting rid of plastic bags. That was sort of one thing that the retailers did to reduce their environmental footprint. So what can you do in your business to do that? The second big thing is food waste. And we know that it's a huge issue. The sort of rough numbers, probably over 30% of the food produced is not consumed. And we know there's many, many different reasons for that, but the industry and consumers are saying, hey, we want to see change there. We want to see industry work together with retailers and producers and processors and everybody in the value chain to try to reduce that. So definitely an opportunity if you can bring things to the table that reduce food waste. And then the third part is sustainability being packaging. And we know there's a lot in the news about packaging and plastic and different things. So if there are things you can do within your business to bring some things to the category, sometimes it can be a route to the shelf. I mean, a sustainable packaging, we see examples in many categories like Appeal, which is the plastics, not plastic, it's a biodegradable sleeve on English cucumbers, for example. And, I think that really got a lot of market for the producer who's using that product as opposed to the old sort of plastic sleeve that would have been or is still being used. So it can be a route to the shelf for you if you can differentiate on packaging or any of the sustainability pieces. So there's some of the things going on in the industry today, some of the things that I really hope you see that you need to consider when you're trying to get to the shelf, when you're putting together that presentation to get that listing and get your product on the shelf. You need to definitely address some of those issues and be able to talk to them about how your product staying relevant in a very rapidly changing market. So Dolores, maybe we'll take a pause there and see if anybody's got any questions. And like I said, I really encourage people to put some questions in if you have them, because I want to make sure that we're addressing issues. And if you say, gee, I wonder about this, why didn't Peter talk about this in terms of relevance? Then by all means, put a question in and I'd be happy to answer it. So I'll just check and see if you've got any questions, Dolores, or not. And if not, then I'll keep going. But just wanted to remind people to do that.
Yes, I do have questions. When you say millennials, what age are you referring to?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say, and I'm going to have to do the math here, I think. I would say those people now would probably be 30 to 43 or 44.
All right. And How do we find out margins for category where we compete? Is this information readily available? Specifically interested in the RTD.
Ready to drink?
Oh, RTD, refrigerated coffee space. Sorry, had to get the last of the line there.
Ready to drink refrigerated coffee.
Coffee
So like a
space.
cold brew coffee kind of thing.
Yeah.
I
I'm
assume
assuming.
like a cold brew. And maybe the person could just confirm for you, but and trust me, that category is is definitely growing in my house. We have 2 teenage daughters and they're like, can you buy the cold brew? So margins, yes. And that is a great question. And we're going to talk about pricing and some of the things, because getting on the shelf requires you have the right price. But is that information readily available? No. There's nowhere that kind of lists that and publishes it. I'll give you some rough numbers. And in terms of ready to drink refrigerated coffee, which we would say would usually be in the grocery department, I would say the retailers are probably trying to make a 30% gross margin on that product. And remember, it's gross margin, not markup. And we'll talk about that a little bit later too. But I would say in the grocery department, you probably need to be planning for the retailer to be making a 30% gross margin there.
All right. All right, hang on. And it was about cold brew, so we were right.
All right.
Any trend for grocery warehouses dedicated to online shopping, eliminating traditional grocery stores?
Right. Yeah, that's a really interesting topic, because the retailers are all grappling with how do we manage this e-commerce issue, and we see different models in place. So Loblaw and Walmart adopted more of a click and collect model, where the retailer will, or sorry, the consumer will go to the website, decide what products they want to buy from everything that's listed there. They'll click on the items, create an order, and then it will go to the store they select as their favorite store. The people in the store will go around the store and collect the products and put them in the bags, and then the consumer will go and collect at the store. That's where the click and collect comes from. So that's one model, but the retailers are not sold on that. They don't find it's the most efficient, but the problem is, as you take volume out of stores, they become less efficient. So they're sort of torn. Do we still want the people going to the store to pick up and be able to keep the volume going through there? So that's one model. Sobeys have introduced what they call Voila, which is a warehouse dedicated to e-commerce, and so it's e-commerce and delivery. So the consumer buys online and from their Voila Sobeys website, and then their groceries are delivered to them. Now, right now, they've only implemented this in Toronto. It's a very automated warehouse. You know, you can watch, there's actually videos online. If you go online, you can see them. There's robots scurrying all over the place, picking orders, very few people. As I say, very automated, and they're really, you know, the focus there is on trying to reduce that cost per order to get it down. And Sobeys are talking about introducing more of the warehouses with the Voila concept. They've talked about Montreal, they've talked about, I believe, Vancouver and probably Calgary, obviously the dense urban markets in Canada. And that's our biggest issue in Canada with e-commerce, is we're so spread out, it's very difficult to do the shipping efficiently. And that's why some of the retailers adopt that click and collect model. Then there's some other sort of hybrids we've seen where Loblaws are taking portions of stores, so they will reduce the retail footprint of a location and put kind of an e-commerce warehouse on, say, let's say a third of the real estate, and pick product from that. But it's a reduced listing base, usually higher volume products. So I think what they're trying to do there is they're saying we're going to automatically or much more efficiently pick the high volume items, and then we'll let employees go in the store and buy and get the 20% that are low volume items for those grocery orders. So it's a bit of a hybrid model where they're trying that, and then we're seeing other ones where we're, you know, totally dedicated to e-commerce, but lots of different options out there because they're trying to figure it out.
All right, so we have 3 more questions, Peter. I'm just not sure if you want to continue with the questions right now or continue
we'll
on
do
with
those 3 now, Dolores, and then I'll keep going. I should probably answer them a little quicker though, eh?
Okay, yes. Okay, the same question about ready to drink for the alcohol and non-alcohol space.
Okay, that one there. Um, uh, I, I don't know the answer to that one. That's something that maybe I need to do some research and get back to. Maybe if you could find out who that is, then maybe we could follow up with them
You bet.
because I don't know the answer to that one. We don't have in the east where I am in Nova Scotia, there are the beverage alcohol laws are very different. So I would want to give you the right answer, and I don't know the number for that one.
Okay, next question. How do you know what a particular retail is looking for at any point in time?
A particular retailer looking for. I think one of the most important things is go in the stores, walk the stores, look at the message that they're giving their consumers in the stores, and then you say, okay, how do I support that? Is it heavy, heavy price? Is it heavy, heavy, we support local? Is it heavy about health? Like, what are the messages that they're trying to say to their consumer? Look at this, walk the stores, walk the category you're in. Spend time looking at the ads. That's another way of communication. Watch all the communication that they put out, whether it's flyers, whether it's on social media, anything you can get. I would encourage everybody to have subscriptions to industry trade magazines, things like Canadian Grocer, and if you're on the produce side, The Grower. Those are all grocery business. They're all great sources of information about your customers. And then the last thing is you need to have a great relationship with them so you can talk to them. But I'm always a huge fan of going in and saying, this is where we see you going. Are we correct? Don't just go in and go, what do you want? Because it's not their job to be the sales and marketing for your business. You need to have a position. But so I like to put a position forward and then have a conversation about it. And one last thing I'll add is always look at the quarterly results. They share a ton of information, the big retailers, because they have to share their results publicly. Look at those reports because they put out a lot of information for people in those.
All right. What are the margins? What are the margins major retail stores want for RTD iced tea category? What do you think about the hibiscus iced tea category, and what do you see in the market about hibiscus flavored beverages?
All right, we're getting specific now.
We are very specific.
I guess, yeah. So first, I would say the margin level would probably be pretty similar to that cold brew answer. So 30% would be probably what they would be looking for. I think that the refrigerated tea category is growing. We're seeing, some of the big players are in there. We know tea, I think, is the #1 beverage in the world. So there's more and more demand for that refrigerated ready to drink. The challenge that I see in it is that it's very expensive real estate in the stores. The refrigerated space is in demand. If you're looking for a regional listing, you're probably going to be expected to pay some hefty listing fees because that is expensive space to the retailers and it's in demand space, which really impacts what listing fees they can command for the space. I think that the flavor profile, you really have to make sure that you're appealing to a sizable, a big enough target market, because some of these products like hibiscus, where there's a certain taste to it, you need to make sure that there's enough of the population out there who are going to look for it and have the ability to pick it up and buy it. And we know ready to drink is always, it's a premium over somebody making it at home, and it's expensive to drag around a heavy liquid. So you have a fair amount of costs. So especially that aren't actual pure product costs, the logistics, the listing fees, some of those kind of things. So make sure you build that into your economic model and make sure that the target market is big enough to support the sales you need. So,
All right,
so is that the three, Dolores?
We're going to stop there because we keep getting more questions. So we're going to move
Okay.
on with the presentation. For those who've asked questions, we will get to you, I promise.
All right, perfect. Thanks very much. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to do a little bit of an interactive piece. And if Dolores, if you could put that link for Jamboard into the chat, what we're going to do is we're going to give you a link to what's called a Google Jamboard. And this is kind of an interactive whiteboard space. And what we've done is we've pre-populated it with a bunch of, they look like little sticky notes. And you will have the ability to move them around on the screen. And what we've done, and we've got a lot of people here with us today, which is fantastic. So you might not all get to grab a sticky note, but what we want you to do is think about these as needs of customers or consumers. So customers being the retailers, the distributors who buy your products, or consumers, which would be the end user, the people who buy your product in the store or use it with their family, that kind of thing. And some of those needs are common, so you can see where the two circles intersect. So I'm going to flip my screen over to the Jamboard, and we'll see if people are logged in or not. Oh, okay, you're way ahead of me. I don't even need to explain how to do this. Look at people are grabbing those Post-it notes and moving them around. They're flying around on the screen. So if you haven't logged in yet, you might not get a chance. So wow, you people are fast. Okay, they're still moving them. They keep moving. Okay. So that, oh, somebody didn't agree. No, they're moving them around again. And some of it is subjective for sure, right? So let's, if I could ask you to stop moving them. And thank you for the quick participation. That was like super lightning fast. That was great. I think you actually had it before it even got over the internet here to Nova Scotia. You were moving them around. So all right, so let's see what you've done. And I'm going to go in and start just grabbing a few of them and just have a quick conversation. Then we're going to take a bit of a deep dive into these. So I see you've got sales, service level, listing fees, trade spend, EDI, private label. And I'm going to define some of these terms for you. And as I mentioned, we've got our whole glossary of terms that you can download. So if you don't really understand what some of these are, then it'll be on that glossary of terms. Margin, dedicated contact person, definitely your customers need that. If you're going to sell into these big retailers, you got to have a resource who's going to deal with the rebates, store traffic, UPC codes, yes. Claims, third-party audited food safety, yes. You people are bang on. I can't even move any of these Post-it notes. So, and let me just look over on the consumer side now. Consumers look for recipes, yes. Taste, yes. And you know, that's something that's interesting. It's really more important to get the taste right for the consumer. That's the critical thing. The retailer wants the sales. The consumer wants the taste so that they use the product. Yes, they want that online community. They're looking for local. Local, I may now move to the middle. In the past, I would have said it was more a consumer thing, but now I believe they both want them. And I believe the retailers want them. Days at home to use the product, yes. Okay, meet or exceed specs and standards. I'm going to move that over to the customer side. They're the ones who are going to check to make sure that your product meets or exceeds the standards you told them that you were going to deliver. Best before dates, yes. In-store specials, sure, they both want that. Value, yeah. Reliability, definitely. Sustainable packaging, I agree. I think that, you know, that's something that both retailers and consumers are looking for. Competitive product cost, I'm going to move that over to the customer side. I think they're the ones who are going to negotiate the costs with you. You know, the retailer or the consumer wants more the value piece, the price and the quality, but the customer is going to negotiate that cost with you. Oh, somebody else moved it there. Quality, yes, they're going to look for it. Satisfied customers, I'm going to move that to the retailer side. They're the ones who need those people happy in their stores, which they depend on you to deliver. Quality fresh image, I'm going to move that to the retailer side. The link to the producer's website, yeah, I'll give you that. A lot of times I'll say on the consumer side, but you know, there's no doubt the retailers are going to check your website, so make sure that that they know how to find you. Healthy products, yes. Sustainable packaging we talked about, and local. So you can see how each of those different stakeholders, the customers, the retailers have a whole bunch of needs, and the consumers have some different needs, and then there's some that interact. So when you want to get on the shelf, you've got to make sure you're addressing those needs. So if you're going in to talk to a retailer, and you need to understand what are their food safety requirements, what are their EDI requirements. So, and if you want, we've given you access to that Jamboard. You can download that now as a PDF if you want to keep that as sort of a reference for the future. I love it. It's a great tool. It's great, and I appreciate everybody who jumped in and moved the Post-it notes around. So thank you for your participation there. So let's talk about some of those needs and figure out just, you know, what are the retailers, and we're going to, if you want to get on the shelf, you've got to address these needs, and we're going to talk about needs, we're going to talk about wants, And we're going to talk about some realities of dealing with these retailers. So let's talk about the needs. The first one is sales. The number one priority of any food retailer, it has to be sales. They have to drive that top line. So when you go in and talk to them, you need to be talking about sales. What sales are your products going to deliver? And I really like it when you can be able to have a conversation about growing the category. You can't just cannibalize sales from another product. I mean, why would we put that, product B on the shelf if it's just going to take the sales from product A? That doesn't make a lot of sense. So we need to think about how you grow the category. So I put a picture of Smack Dab Mustard. I don't know if you've seen that product or not. It's from Carly Minishwittick in Manitoba. And I think it's a great example of being able to go in and have a conversation about growing the category. And when Carly introduced Smack Dab, most of the stores would have had sort of the yellow mustard, the sort of the basic yellow mustard. Would have had probably a private label and maybe a French's or a Heinz or something like that. And then they might have had another segment of the category like Dijon, maybe a honey mustard or something like that, and probably some private label. But when Carly brought in her, what we'll say, premium mustards, it was a way to grow that category and bring new people into the category, provide new uses like marinades and things like that. So be able to have that conversation with your customer about saying, okay, I'm going to bring new people into the category for you. I'm going to grow the category. And they love being able to listen to that. Margin. We already talked about chips, so I used the picture twice because it's it was such a big issue in our inventory or in our industry. But retailers need to drive margin. And I'm happy you're asking about what the margin should be, and those two questions about the cold brew and about the hibiscus tea. You need to know the margin the retailers expect. And it costs money to run stores. It costs money to do all the things the retailer does, so they have to make a profit margin. Remember, it's not all profit that they make. They have expenses that got to come out of that margin. So understand the category margin, and then know that they're going to do that. They have to deliver that margin on every product in the category. Another thing that retailers need is opportunities to reduce shrink. And especially if you're going to be selling in the perishable department, shrink is a big issue. And it's probably after labor, it's the second largest controllable expense for a retailer. So we really have to make sure that we're bringing opportunities to the table that are going to reduce shrink for them. So the reason the picture is on the screen there is a product called Cedar Bay Planked Salmon. And I know if you come from the West, you're more likely to think maybe Pacific salmon, but those of us in the East, we have this thing here called Atlantic salmon, which we like. And so this is a product that was developed here in Nova Scotia. And I will always remember the day that the person who developed this product, they asked me to give them some input. And so we met for a cup of coffee. And so we're sitting out having a cup of coffee, and he brings out this cooler bag and he says, I want to show you this product and I want to get your opinion on it. And he brings it out, and he had done the vac pack at home, like it was totally homemade, kind of prototype sort of time in the evolution of the product. And he brings it out, and the first thing I thought when I looked at that, I was like, damn, I wish I thought of that. It's a great idea. So he's pre-soaked the cedar planks and then the salmon, and then he's got several different flavors that he puts on top. But the reason I bring it up from a shrink reduction point of view is he could have done that product as a fresh product or a frozen product, but he figured out how to get the eating experience just right as a frozen product. And for the retailer, that's way less shrink doing it frozen than doing it fresh. So think about those things. If you're in the development stage, if you're already in the market, then think about what are the things you can do that are going to reduce shrink for the retailer. Big issue for them, and if you can help them, they'll be happy. Service level, I talked about that as being a changing priority for the retailers. This is actually a sign at Loblaw. If you go to a meeting at the Loblaw office, I probably wasn't supposed to take a picture, so don't tell them I did that, but it was a while ago. So you can imagine which side of that sign you want to be on. Do you want to be on the check mark side or the bad side, the X side? So service level is a major issue. And let me give you a definition for service level. It's in our glossary of terms, but service level would be defined as the number of cases that you deliver on time, in full, to the right place, with the right labeling and the right packaging and the right UPC code divided by the number of cases the retailer orders. So if we use round numbers and the retailer orders 100 cases from you and you're able to fulfill that order at 95 cases delivered on time in, to the right place with the right labeling and all those things I mentioned, then your service level would be calculated at 95%. Now, if you call them and say, oh, my lids didn't show up, or I had a problem with my line, or my labor didn't come, or whatever, I'm only able to deliver 50%, but I'll get the other 45 to you tomorrow, that's still 50% service level in their mind. And they're really probably hoping, or not hoping, expecting you to be at 95 or 96%. So service level is something the retailers need, and if you can differentiate yourself on service level, you are way ahead of a lot of the other people going out there in our industry today. So really something, and I'd encourage you to share that information with your customers. If you're doing a great job on service level, tell them. And it's not bragging. You're just reporting and you're saying, this is an important issue to you. I just want to let you know in the last quarter, we were 96%. Congratulations to our team. Get your whole team rallied around that because it's a big one. Trade spend. Another thing the retailers need, they need you to and expect you to come in and invest with them. And we're going to talk about the components of trade spend, but trade spend where you invest money with the retailer to drive sales. So lots of different options there for you to do that, but they need suppliers to do that. It's built into their business model. So let's talk about some wants. So these are not, you have to do it, but these are some things that the retailers appreciate and are looking for. And again, you can't do it all. So pick what your business is good at. The retailers are looking for local products. There's no doubt. We talked about consumers wanting it. They all, they're implementing these local programs and that kind of thing. So they want to be able to have those signs in their store that says, hey, we support local and that kind of thing. So if you fit the bill, then make sure that you tell about it. But also tell your story. As we talked about right off the top, the very first slide I showed you about the value of food and people are interested. So that means you need to make sure you tell your story. And we have an example, and I'm trying to give you some examples from different markets. I appreciate that a lot of you are in Alberta, and I'm sure there's some great examples there, but I'm trying to give you some different examples to see some different things in that. So this is an example from here in Nova Scotia. This is a company called Peace by Chocolate. You probably could see their products in Sobeys Safeway stores in Western Canada, and they've done a great job of telling their story. They're a family who immigrated to Canada from Syria, and they've told their story about what happened to them, and people have really embraced it and looked for the products, and it's given them the opportunity to create quite a business. So, but tell your story. The retailers need you to tell your story because that's part of supporting them, right? Sustainability, you mentioned it in the poll, and we talked about it as being a big issue in our industry. So sustainability is a want. It's not a must-have. The retailers are not saying if you don't know. I should rephrase that a little bit. Some of them are going to give you some parameters around recyclable packaging or things like that, but it's really like within the category. If you can present a unique or a different sustainable option, that can be a route to the shelf for you. So, and those are the cucumbers that I was talking about earlier. The retailers want to have decent relationships with their suppliers. If I think back to my days at Loblaw, I mean, I didn't get up in the morning and go and say, okay, I want to be miserable today. I didn't do that. Maybe some of them do now, I don't know. But seriously, I think that sometimes it gets them in a bad mood when people don't do what they say they're going to do, or they let them down, or whatever it is. So I think you have to work on that relationship, and it's not like, oh, I hope they don't call because it's going to be bad news. It's like being proactive, and you don't want to get to a point where you're bugging them, no, but you need to get to that point where you can have a regular level of communication, and it's whether it's good or bad, you can have a good piece of communication with them. So make sure that you have the resources in place in your business. If you want to get on the shelf, you have to have somebody who's going to take care of them as a customer. It's not just, oh, when I get done doing the other things, I'll call you back. No, it's somebody who's going to be there on the end of the phone for them, who can understand their business and who can deal with them on the issues they want deal with. So make sure that you work on that relationship, measure it, think about how good is that relationship every quarter. You know, are they calling me back? Are they giving me opportunities? Are they including me in a local, if you're a local supplier, did they include me in the local supplier day? Oh no, they forgot about me because I'm not on the list. You know, things like that. Take a look at that relationship. And then the other thing is that retailers really need to get from you is a sales estimate. How is your product going to perform? And from my perspective, this is one of the most important numbers that you really have to get with the retailer. And it's our job as a supplier to put it forward and say, you know, based on my history and what I expect, I believe we're going to sell 20 units per store per week. And then you find out, do they agree with that number? Does that make sense? Because ultimately, that's how you're going to get judged. They may love your product, they may really like dealing with you, but if they think your product's going to sell 20 units per store per week and it only performs at 10, then they can't keep you on the shelf. There's somebody else who's going to do the 20. So we really have to get that sales estimate. And remember, make sure that you get a number from them, because it's one thing if you think 10 is a great number. Wow, if I'm in 100 stores and I'm doing 10 units per week, that's 1,000 units per week. I'm going to be doing well, you know, that's good. But if they think it should be 20, then they're not going to be happy. So that's something that we really have to focus on. And another thing the retailers want is they need support from you. They need you to help them do their job better. So if you think of a category manager, they're managing, I don't know, depending on the size of the category, could be 1,000, could be 1,500 SKUs, who knows? But you know, they're busy. They've got a lot of different things on the go. So what are some of the things that you can do to help them do their job better? And if you are a supplier in a regional part of the country, and if you're dealing with any of our national retailers, a lot of them, the offices are in Ontario. So you can help them by understanding what's going on in your market, what's going on out there, things like that. Here's an example. This is a company that I do a bunch of work for. They're a horticulture producer here in Nova Scotia. And during their season, which sort of runs May till Thanksgiving probably, they produce a newsletter every 2 weeks, which goes to all the category managers, all the buyers, all the different people, and they sell into all the major retailers. And they just tell them what's going on. You know, and it's not a buy this, buy that kind of piece. It's here's some additional things going on. We pick a different topic every week to kind of talk about. It could be labor, it could be new pests, it could be an equipment thing, whatever it is, because knowledge is power. And when you can help your customers understand things, and a category manager can go to a meeting and say, oh, you know, there's a new thing going on, blah, blah, blah. It shows that they are knowledgeable and that they are contributing in their business. So anytime you can support these people, and don't always expect an answer back. They're not going to write you back and say, oh, thank you, you know, that was fantastic. But a lot of them read this. I can tell you, a lot of them, they mention it when we have our one-on-one meetings. They're like, oh, wow. You know, we appreciate it. We do take a look at it when we get it, so keep it up. So, you know, things that you can do, find out what you can do. Don't copy that idea, find a different one. But there's things that you can do to support your customers, and that helps you get on the shelf too, because when you do that, then you're a resource. You're more than just somebody who has a jar of something or a bag of something. And here's a few realities of dealing with the retailers. And you have to accept these. You know, it's their company and their store, and they can run it the way they want. So the first thing is food safety. It's not negotiable anymore. You need to know what their expectations are. They can be different by department, so make sure that you make the inquiries and ask. And then prior to going to them, you need to have this in place. You can't go to them and say, oh, you know, I'm going to expect to get that in 8 months' time, because it always takes longer. And they're going to say, look, you need to deal with me when you're good and ready to go. So food safety is one that you really have to pay attention to, and it's a reality of our industry. Another reality is private label. Most of our retailers now have a pretty robust private label program. I put the President's Choice products on the screen there because they would probably have the highest penetration. So at Loblaw nationally, private label being President's Choice and No Name, the products where they control the brands, probably make up more than 1/3 of their sales, you know, across the whole store. It could be different by category, by department, but roughly about 1/3. And other retailers is probably lower than that. But private label for the retailers, they see it as number one, most importantly, is it's a loyalty program for them. Because if they can get you hooked on, if you're somebody who wants to have portobello Swiss burgers like the ones on the screen, and you, oh, the President's Choice ones are, oh, they're the best, then the people at Loblaw know you're going to go back to their store for that. So that's why it's a loyalty program for them. They do make more margin on private label. I'm not sure it's always taking more dollars to the bank when you look at how much they promote it and the investments they have to make to do that. But when they look at the shelf margin, they make more profit on it. And it does bring people in the stores when they have events and things like that. So private label, it's a reality. Never diss the private label products in your category. If you don't like them, then keep that to yourself, because the retailers see them as their own products, right? So, but make sure that if there is a private label in the category where you're trying to get on the shelf, kind of understand the position of it, because they're not going to put a product in that competes directly with their private label. Like, I would be very surprised if Loblaw had another Portobello Swiss frozen burger in the meat department. You know, they might have other frozen burgers branded product, but probably not as specific as the Portobello Swiss one. Maybe, but probably not. Another reality of dealing with the retailers are the category managers. And the reason I have that photo on the screen is they're all different. They're all people, and they're all unique. So you need to learn about them. Talk to other people in the industry, talk to other suppliers, talk to brokers, you know, get an understanding, meet them, try to meet them if you ever can at a trade show, or somehow get a sense of who they are and what they're looking for. Are they looking to drive sales? Are they looking to drive margin? Like, what's their focus? And like I say, they're all different and they keep changing all the time. That's part of the nature of this crazy industry we're in. So you just have to accept that. And every time you get a new one, it's an opportunity again to educate them about who you are and what you do. So it's a reality of it. Another reality is the retailers are very siloed. You know, you have the category managers who work in the merchandising group, you have the operations group, and you have what we call usually supply chain or sourcing and procurement. And that's where the buyers are. And these are the people, if you go through the warehouse, if your products are listed through the warehouse, these are the people who cut the purchase orders. They don't decide who to buy from, but they do decide how much to buy. So they are an important people, and they are important people that you need to build relationships with. And then the same EDI, electronic data interchange, another one of our terms in our glossary. That is how you will communicate with the retailers. So if you're going to, you know, if you're going to go into, say, the Sobeys Safeway local program and probably do direct store delivery, then you don't need to communicate as much on EDI. They will pay you electronically, but you're not going to get orders or anything. As soon as you go into the warehouse, you need to be ready to communicate electronically with them. That's how the purchase orders will come to you, and your system needs to be able to talk to their system, and that costs money. So make sure that you investigate into that and find the right options for you, because there are different options. Another thing that you really need to deal with if you're going to sell into these retailers and be prepared is to have store coverage. You need to know what's going on at store level. The stores are not perfect at executing, so you need to have eyes and ears out there to tell you what's going on. And it could be your own people, it could be people you contract, like through a rep from a broker or through a field agent or something like that, but you need to know what's going on at the stores, because if you don't, then if things don't work out right, you're not going to know. Was it an execution issue? Was it just people didn't like the product? Was it that our advertising, you know, so you really need to have store coverage built into your model. So those are all of the different needs, wants, and realities of dealing with the retailers. So think about all those things when you're trying to figure out how to put that strategy together to get on the shelf. And now on the screen, you see a photo. Now those are my 3 kids. On the left is Georgia, and I'm going to tell you why I'm going to talk to you about my kids, because I'm moving from sort of the retailers to Peter's family. So, but there is a reason for that. So I'm going to tell you about them, and then I'll tell you why I'm going to tell you about them. So first on the left is Georgia. Georgia is 16 and just got her driver's license. So we're going through that whole piece of Georgia learning how to drive, and Dad in the passenger seat holding on to that handle up top there. But anyway, she's been doing well with that. Georgia is big into dance. She loves dance. She does dance probably 2 or 3 times a week. She's done it since she was really young. Georgia plays the flute. She's plays the flute in her high school band and in an honor band. She really enjoys music. She's able to, I don't know how she does it. It's not comes from me, but she's able to just pick up instruments. She picked up the tenor sax, and all of a sudden I hear this thing going, and then she's got a guitar, and so she loves music and is able to do that. She does well in school. She just wrote her physics exam today. And Georgia works at a local diner at the end of our street. She works in the drive-through at the diner. In the middle is Grace. Grace is 15. Grace is big into reading. She loves to read. She's a very talented artist. We can't get her to do it much. She doesn't seem to want to do it as much as we would like to see her do it. So, but any of you who have kids, you're gonna just say, okay, you know, it's your thing. Hopefully you'll want to do it at some point. Grace just started working at Sobeys, so another person working in the food industry in the family. She's been working as a cashier and studying produce PLU codes and stuff like that. So that's Grace, she's 15. And then on the right is Will. Will is 22. He's in his last year at St. Francis Xavier University in Nova Scotia. He's the starting right guard on the football team. Will, if you could see him beside me, he's a little bigger. He's 6'1", about 285, 290 pounds, and he can lift a lot more weight than I can too. He loves football. He's played football since he was a kid, and it's been a great thing for him. It's been a great thing for him through university. He does great with his marks. He works for a medical startup company as well while he's going to school. It's been something that has worked out well for him. So those are my three kids, all very different, right? Now, they grew up in the same communities, pretty much went to the same schools, had a lot of the same upbringing, but they are all very unique. And I want you to think of the retailers the same way. If you want to sell food, you know, they're all selling food. Sobeys, Loblaws, whoever it is, Whole Foods, whatever, they're all selling food, but they have their own way of doing it. And when you go in to talk to them about these, you know, needs and wants and realities and what's going on in our industry, you can't talk to them all the same way about it. So if you want to go in and talk to loyalty program with Sobeys, then, you know, it's Scene Points and you've got to talk to them about their program. You want to talk to Walmart, they don't have a loyalty program. Their loyalty program is we've got the best price. So you need to think about having a conversation that is really generated specifically for that customer. It doesn't mean you have to change everything, because obviously your product is not going to change. You may have a different size or something if you're trying to be in Costco, but it's really more about the conversation you have with them and what your product does to support how they're trying to position their stores in the market. So think of, when you think about the retailers, I want you to think about my three kids and remember that they're all different and that they have their own way of selling food and beverage. Now, I keep talking about this glossary of terms. So here's your chance to get this glossary of terms. So we put together this piece for you, and it's got over 100 food industry terms. And I'm going to put a QR code on the screen, and you should be able to just grab that. If you use the camera on your phone, you should be able to grab that. It will take you to a site where you have to put in your email, and then you'll be able to download our industry terms for you. So I hope that's really helpful for you. And speaking the language of the retailers is important. When you go in to have a conversation with them, you need to know the difference between margin and markup, or you need to know if they say, well, we want to put you on TPR. What's that mean? Well, it's temporary price reduction. So that means they want to do some kind of a discount. So you need to know the language. So hopefully that glossary of terms is really helpful for you. It was fun putting it together, and hopefully you've had a chance by now to download it. If there's any issue, we can follow up after, but should work. We've tested it all, and it should work for you. So hope that that's beneficial to you. And by all means, you know, send me an email sometime if it was helpful to you, or if there's a term where you go, hey, Peter, you missed one. My email is peter@skufood.com. So peter@skufood.com. And I'd be happy to either define the term, or if it helped you, then that's great. We can share that story. So Dolores, I'm going to stop for a couple minutes to see if you got any questions, and then I will keep going. We're going to talk about pricing next. So.
All right, one moment. I'm scrolling back up here. All right, so the question that we ended off on is, have pushed back on suppliers to keep prices to consumers stable and protect market share. What are the pros and cons of implementing a price increase now to protect margin?
Well, I think that suppliers always have to make sure that the price they're selling their products for is the right price. And retailers have to accept that. And it's you can't get yourself in a position where you're not generating enough return from your products to operate your business, because it's the costs are probably not going down. So you know, I hear people say, oh, I'm waiting for it to level out, or I'm waiting, you know, I'm hoping it might go back again or whatever. But I think you have to make sure, and now pick windows of time too. You can't keep changing your costs all the time. A lot of the retailers have category review windows where they're only going to entertain a cost increase between certain dates. So they may say, we're looking at cookies between February 25th and March 31st, March 25th. So get your price increase to us only during that time. If you wait till after, we're not going to look at it. So that's something you have to be aware of, are those windows. But make sure that you know, that the people in your business who are dealing with the retailers, you have to keep your costs current, or it's going to become a worse problem down the road.
All right, thank you. The next one is just a comment, and I'll see if you can do it. Can I get the information on the gross margin for the ready-to-drink alcohol versus non-alcohol? Is that something that we can share with the
Yeah,
people?
if you know who it is, then
I
I will
do.
do my best to follow up and see whether we can find that for you. And maybe if they could let you know, is that selling through like one of the mainstream retailers? Because I know some of the retailers have their own stores and there's different places. So maybe if they could just tell you where it is they're trying to sell it.
Okay, perfect. Yes.
All right.
All right. Next question. Which is the general margin for beverages and retailers? Is there any info about kombucha you can share, and energy drinks?
All right. What was the first part, Dolores? Could
What
you
is
just
the
repeat?
general margin for beverages and retailers?
Yeah, if you're selling, and kombucha is an interesting one because we see it in different parts of the store. So if you're selling in the grocery department, I'll use that 30% number. I think that's a pretty universal number for most things in grocery. If you're in the natural food set, they might be trying to make a little bit more, say maybe a 32 to 34. And then if you're in the produce department, it's probably more like 42 to 45.
All right. How do you define local in a multi-ingredient product? Is it local production, local ingredients? Is there an industry standard?
Well, the answer to the last question is I don't know of a great industry standard. I think that's one of the challenges sometimes in these things. The water gets muddied a little bit. But I would say that the first sort of criteria would be where it's produced, and then the second thing would be from local ingredients. So you know, you can say you're local if you're produced somewhere that's, you know, within a certain and again, even that, you know, there were some people who were trying to say, well, it's within 100 kilometers, and there's some people within the province, and then within the region, you know, Western Canada. So it's hard. But I would say, if you were to ask me what I think, I think it's where it's produced. And I think for sure, if it's within the province, then you would definitely be safe with saying local. But again, that's a Peter Chapman kind of definition. There isn't really a specific that I'm aware of. Sort of specific definition for it.
All right. This is just a quick question for you.
Yep.
Peter, do you offer one-on-one consulting services for emerging brands?
Yes, I do. Yeah,
All
that's
right.
what we do. We do a
All
lot of
right.
that.
So if you need more information, let me know.
Yeah.
Okay. Any thoughts on solving the problem of the disconnect between the consumer and the producer on the shelf cost and the rising cost for vendors to create their product?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that there's never been a time when consumers have been more interested in food. So if you can, I think sharing your story right now really is, it can be timely. But what I always want to encourage people to do is twist it so you're giving it to them from the consumer perspective, not just, you know, here's our whatever, and the price of this went up by 10% and the price of this went up 15%. Say, you know, consumers want us to produce a gluten-free product. So our choices for gluten-free flours were this one, and this one. We looked at, using this one because of that, and the price went up by this much. So try to give it to them from their perspective, not just what happened to you, because I think if you just talk about what happened to you, their eyes will glaze over. But make it relevant back for them.
All right. How do you determine the sales estimate for a new product?
That's a good one. I think you want to look at if you can get sales data from the category, you can start to learn some things. So, where you're going to be positioned in the store, you can start to try and get some things from like items. Now, that's not always easy to obtain. Sometimes you can get it, sometimes you can't. If you're, some people will buy Nielsen data, which is very expensive, but sometimes you have to make that investment to understand, what the potential is or the size of the category, that kind of thing. Now, when you're looking at doing the estimate, like I said, you want to look for either like items or competing items. You want to look for, if you're trying to get it listed in a store, and you're going into present it to the retailer, you may be a little bit more in this case trying to say to them, what would your impression be? As I said earlier, I'm always a fan of putting a number out there, but sometimes if it's really new, you might have to try to get their impression. If you have any sense of how much you can sell either direct to consumers or in specialty channels or any other kind of markets, that's all information that you can use to sort of add that up and help. And if you're, I'm always an advocate of talking to the people in the stores too. So if your product's going to be sold in the deli, even if it's not a direct competition or even a similar, try and find something that you think would be around the same and ask them, how many units of that thing a week do you sell? And if they say 8, then you go, okay, I'm around that. So those would be some ways. Another thing you want to do is look at sort of the department penetration. And, sometimes a lot of times, I'm in Atlantic Canada, people come with a seafood product. And the reality is seafood is about 2% of total store sales. So if you think 2% and if there's 300 listings, you start to go down and do the math, you go, holy smokes, it's not that big sales per unit or per item in the store. So there's different ways to look at it and attack it. It's always tough with a really new or unique item. It's more difficult, I'll grant you that. But there are ways to be able to work through it and try to figure it out.
All right. How often can you reach out to the retailer? Should it be regular or random?
I think that if you have a product that's listed, you should be communicating with them probably monthly. And again, don't always expect an answer back, but you need to just be touching base with them. I think you need to be face to face probably at least twice a year. And now we can do it through virtual. So you can, just have it can be a 30-minute, a 20-minute meeting, but it's just to have that face-to-face interaction so they know who they're dealing with. But make sure there's a purpose and make sure you give them value for their 20 or 30 minutes. Here's our plan for the next 6 months, or here's our plan for the next year. This is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to get these sales for you. Those kind of conversations. So I'm a fan of not letting it go past a month. Now, if something comes up and you want to share it, then twice in 1 month, there's nothing wrong with that.
All right. So this is the last question I'm going to ask you for now because we have a ton more, but we'll let you keep going. What's your take on websites like Range-Me that require you to pay to connect with buyers?
Right, Range-Me. So Range-Me is becoming, if you're trying to sell into the US, Range-Me is pretty much mandatory. A lot of retailers in the US are using it. And for those of you who don't know, Range-Me is sort of a place where you can build a profile of your product and your business. And the idea is that category managers, people who work on the retail side or distributors, will go in and look at your information and say, oh, look, I've always been looking for that specialty rye bread. I'm going to call you. So it's a place where you can connect online. And if you buy the premium package, you can see who's looking. So you can say, oh, look, the category manager from so-and-so, look, I need to reach out to them. So it is a way for that interaction to happen. I think, again, if you want to go to the US, it's pretty much, you really need to be there. In Canada, we're seeing more retailers use it. Whole Foods markets use it. Metro are using it more and more. So it can be, but you have to be proactive. It's not just build your profile and hope they will come. You need to be looking. Who's looking at my products? And then you got to follow up with them and, you know, and try to develop a relationship with them. So it can be a good tool, but you have to use it. It's not, you know, don't think just building a profile that they're going to beat a path to your door. And oh, and one more thing I would tell you, my experience with RangeMe, the people who work for RangeMe can be very helpful. Obviously, they need it to work. They need these interactions to happen, and they need them to be successful for both parties. So they can be quite helpful in terms of getting you set up and getting the most out of the program. So it's something to think about. So, all right, Dolores, I'm going to keep going, and I am very happy that we've got a lot of questions. I certainly appreciate it. So we'll keep going through the content and take another break in a bit. So when it comes to getting on the shelf, you need to remember that you've got to deliver value in the category. And that really can be like where you fit. You have choices. There's different categories where you could be in the store. So if you think a company came to me and they said, Peter, we want to sell more cheese. And I said, okay. All right, you know, cheese is a good item. And then we talked about where they should be in the store. And there's different options. They could be in the grocery department, which is the photo I have up on the screen, where you're going to compete with Kraft or Saputo or Parmalat or whatever, you know, these massive, massive companies. Or you could be in the natural food section, where you could be, you know, more organic or lactose free, that kind of thing. Or you could be in the deli, which is sort of more the traditional place for maybe a bit more higher end quality cheeses. So we looked, and there's different parameters you have to think about. You have to think about the volume you want to do, the price point that you can hit, the packaging that you can do, all those kind of things. So when we talked about it and we talked about the volume they wanted to do, the only place that we could put that cheese was in the grocery department to do the volume. If we had put it in the deli, they wouldn't have done enough volume. So then we said, okay, the grocery is where we got to be. Now we need to design something that's going to sell in that department. And we know we can't take down Kraft. I mean, that's just reality. So we have to be different. So what we did was we came with a smaller size. So it's a different size than Kraft and the big players. We went with a product that's 100% Canadian milk and no modified milk ingredients, which is a big point of differentiation. So we had a difference. We had a point of differentiation where, yes, they're selling old and medium and mild cheddar cheese, but it's different. It's, you know, without saying theirs isn't, but it's real cheese. And the way we got that across to the retailers was when we went in and met with them, we showed them what happened to some of the competitors' products when they weren't refrigerated, and they actually just kind of go like this. They take a cheese block and it just kind of goes like this. And this cheese, because there's no modified milk ingredients in it, stays really solid. We said that's the difference, and they go, okay, there's a difference. And the other thing we did was cheese and grocery is a very high-low category, very deep discounts, high regular price, low discounted ad price, drive people in the store. Probably 70% of that cheese probably gets bought on temporary price reduction. So we decided more of an everyday low price program where we had a few different discounts, but not the same really high lows. So it's different enough. So you have to be strategic about how you approach it. Look at the category, look at what's going on, and figure out where you fit. The next thing is your price. And it's so important that you have, you know, done the work ahead of time so that the retailer prices your product where it needs to be priced. And it's really important. You cannot go in and tell them how to price your product. If you're dealing with any of the big retailers, sometimes in the specialty channel, they'll say, what do you think it should sell for? And that's fine. You can answer the question. But in any of the bigger retailers, you can't tell them how to price it. That's their job. So what you have to do is cost your product. So the price you sell to them needs to be set so that they're going to put the right retailer, the retail that you want on your product. So earlier people were asking about some margins. So, oh, sorry, I didn't get to that point yet, but I will get to that point. I'm going to tell you a little bit how to price your products differently, and then we'll get to the margins. So there's different ways people price their products. There's one which we call cost-based pricing. So that's where you would take your cost of goods, you'd figure out how much you think you need to spend on marketing and that kind of thing and overheads, and then you'd put a markup on your product. So you would say, okay, we think it's going to cost $2 to make it. We want to put a 30% markup. So we're going to multiply 2 times 1.3, and we're going to sell our product for $2.60. So that's one way you can do it. I think you definitely need to understand your costs of producing your product and what goes into it, but I don't think that this is the only way you can price your product. You can't price it in isolation. You need to look at what else is going on. So we do see people who do subscribe to that model, but it's not my favorite model. What I'd like to do is introduce you to what I call category-based pricing. And this is a model of pricing where you really take a look at everything going on around you in the store, and then let's try to figure out, we'll work it backwards to see how your product should be priced. So I'm going to give you a bit of a process to follow. And so the first thing is that you need to start with what we call a category review. So if you go back to the picture I just had on the slide, let's say we're in the salad dressing category, you'd go into the store where you want to sell your products, and you look at all the different products and you write them down, and you say, okay, this one costs this much, this one, and for this size, and do a category review. And I'm going to take you through a little bit of an example here. So I'll show you what I mean. And then after you do the category review and you look at all the different competing products and sizes and, you know, organic or this or that, we're going to say, what is the right price for your product? If you were the category manager, what is the retail price that you would put on it? And then we'll take a look at the category margin, and then we'll figure out we'll do some math, and then we'll figure out what that price should be. So we're going to go through that example, and I'll show you how we're going to do that now. So in that category review, and I tell you, you got to be in the stores. If you want to get on the shelf with these retailers, you have to spend time in the stores, see what they're doing, see what's going on. So for that category review, you need to go in, write down all your competitors, and then look at the equivalent price. So we know there's always lots of different packaging and sizes and stuff like that. So you have to figure out per mil or per gram or whatever it is so that you can compare the products nicely. And then you want to consider the differences. Like I mentioned, it could be organic, it could be locally produced, it could be special ingredients, it could be lactose free. You know, there's lots of different things going on, and you need to kind of assess those. And then we'll figure out what that right price is. So let's look at an example. I mentioned the salad dressing category. We're going to talk about that refrigerated salad dressing category that you see in the produce department. And you can see there where I've listed them on the screen. I'm just going to move that over a bit so I can see. So you can see the products listed down the left-hand side, Bold House and Lighthouse and Opa, which is kind of a bit more of a Greek take on it. And then you have some Lighthouse cream products, Renee's cream products, and then Renee's oil-based products. So we've given you the retail price, we've given you the sizes, and then we calculated that price per 100 mil. So you can see the most expensive in the category we looked at was the Bold House Organic, and that's probably what you would expect, that organic would be the highest price per volume. And then the next one is the Opa, which is actually the Greek one. So they're positioning it as a bit of a specialty product. Then you can see also the sizes, where the Opa one is a little smaller. So it allows them that $4.99 retail compared to $5.99 for the Bold House Organic. So you need to spend some time and think about the different dynamics in the category and just what's going on. And this is what category managers do, right? They're trying to give the consumer a good cross-reference of what's going on in the category. Now we're going to talk about our product. So we just talked about what's in the store today. Now we're going to talk about our product. So we've got some unique flavors of the salad dressing. We've looked, and we're not going to come with you know, the traditional Caesar or whatever. We're going to come with some unique flavors. They're not too crazy because we can't be too far out there or people aren't going to support us. Now, another important decision we've made is that olive oil is going to be the first ingredient. And that's important because in all the competitors, water is the first ingredient. So olive oil is going to be our first ingredient. We believe in salad dressings. That's really important because it sticks to the salad ingredients much better and gives the consumer a much better eating experience. So that's something we're going to promote and we're going to talk about. Our salad dressing is made in Canada, and we're one of the few in the category that's made in Canada. So we're going to promote that, and we're going to put it on our packaging. And we want to sell in a conventional store. And that's important because margins are different in conventional stores. So a Sobeys Safeway margin would be probably higher than Sobeys discount banner like Freshco in the same department. So that's something you always got to remember, that the margins, it depends on the format that you're trying to compete in. And we're going to go with a 310 ml bottle, which is smaller than some of the other ones in the category that you saw. And we're doing that because we know we're probably going to be more expensive because we don't have the economies of scale of our competitors, which are big national companies. So we believe, after looking at all those retails, $5.99 for the Bolthouse Organic and $4.99 for some of the others, we think if we can get our product priced at $5.79, that would be the right price for us in that category. Now, we can't go in and tell the category manager to do that. That's what I said. So we have to make sure that we bring a cost to them so that when they do their math, that they're going to get to $5.79. So I'll show you how to do that. So you can see, you want to go back and look at the category and put our product in there and say, okay, if we're retailed at $5.79, we're not the most expensive, which is always kind of nice. It's like when you buy a house on the street, if you're thinking about resale, you don't always buy the most expensive one. It might be harder to sell that one. So we're a little bit less, but we know we can't be $4.99. It's not realistic for us to be $4.99. And you can see we're still the most expensive per volume, but we're not, excuse me, the highest retail price. And sometimes that's a good place to be. Being the highest retail price is sometimes can be a challenge. Depends on where you're positioned, but can be a challenge. So you can see that's how the category would line up if we were able to get them to price it at $5.79. So here's the margins that you were all asking me about. So you can see, I put them up there for you. Now these are, every retailer is going to be a little different. Like you were asking me about the cold brew and that kind of thing, and I said 30%. And in grocery, probably if you're a bigger branded product, it's going to average out more around 28. But for a regional brand, probably they're going to be trying to make a little bit more, to be honest, because your volume is going to be lower. So those are some of the margins. And again, these are conventional store margins. And it's kind of an average. Sobeys might try to be a little higher. Walmart might try to be a little bit lower and that kind of thing. But these are some good sort of numbers for you when you're thinking about trying to do your pricing. So hopefully I've given you a chance to record the ones that are relevant for you in your products, but that would be kind of the place that we would expect the retailers to try to be shooting for margins. Okay, so I'm going to show you some math, and I'm going to take you through the whole formula, and this will end up helping you figure out how to calculate that selling price. So your selling price equals the retail, so that price point that we want them to price it at, times 1 minus the category gross margin. So let me show you how that all comes out. So your selling price equals the $5.79 retail price that we talked about for the salad dressing, times 1 minus, and we put 45 in there for the gross margin in the produce department. So when you do the math, 579 times 0.55, so you need to sell your salad dressing into the retailer at $3.18 a unit, and then they'll think, okay, I need to make a 45% margin on that. Yeah, I think 579 would be where we need to price that product. So that's a way to do what we call category-based pricing. And that's a way for you to figure out what your selling price should be. Now, you've obviously got to take that 318 and look at it and say, okay, how does that stack up against my, actual cost per unit that I've calculated? And does it cover my overheads? Is it going to pay for trade spend and marketing spend and all those things which we need to do? So that's a really important consideration for you. But it's a way for you to look and say, because if you go in and all you do is say to the retailer, okay, here's my cost, and instead of 318, I'm going to say 450. Well, they're going to price you at over $6, and then you can't. It's not going to work because you're going to be so expensive in the category relative to all the other ones that it's going to be very hard to sell your product for them and you. And so, to help you figure out some of these things, we have a great tool, which we like to use at SKU Food. It's called a profit wheel. So if I go back to my example, and it helps you calculate margin. And I'm not going to show you how to use it here today on the session because it takes a bit of time to show you, but it's a really handy tool to show you how to calculate margin and markup. And if you have one of our profit wheels, then you can go into a store and look at a product and say, oh, I see a salad dressing, it sells for $7. Well, maybe that's too expensive. Let's say it sells for $4.50 and the retailer margin is 45. I just move my wheel around and you say, okay, I bet the retailer is paying about $2.50 for that product. And it works with our profit wheel. So stay tuned, because I've got one more slide, and then we're going to do a little giveaway for profit wheels. So the last thing I want to share with you about your pricing to the retailer is you always want to give them a delivered price. Don't ever say it's going to be plus shipping or anything like that. Retailers always will expect the price you give them to be delivered. And always when you're talking with them, you want to share what your case pack is. They'll want to know that, the unit size, that kind of thing. And then, like I said, don't give them a manufacturer's suggested retail price. Now, if they ask you, perfect. Then you say, I think you should sell our salad dressing for $5.79. And they go, oh, okay, yeah. But don't tell them how to price it. The retailer will not be happy with you if you do that. So I'm going to give you a little warning. So we're going to do this. We're going to give away a couple of our SKU Food Profit Wheels. So if it's something that you think would be a great tool in your business, then we'll send it to you. We'll also send you some instructions on how to use it. So what we're going to do is I have a question for you, and I'm going to put it up on the screen, and then Dolores and Marguerite are going to watch, and the first person who gets the closest to the correct answer, they'll grab your name, and we're going to do it like the Price is Right, so you can't go over. So the closest person who's up to it but not over. So the first question we have for you is, how many products are in the average conventional store? So a conventional store would be like a Sobeys, Safeway type store. How many different SKUs? So remember, if it's a 500 gram peanut butter and it's a 285 gram peanut butter, that's 2 SKUs. If it's a crunchy peanut butter and a smooth peanut butter, that's another 2 SKUs. So how many unique different SKUs, and a SKU is called a stock keeping unit, how many of those are in the average conventional store? So I'll give you a minute to type in your numbers into the chat, and I'll let Dolores and Marguerite watch, and hopefully you can let me know when if we've got somebody who gets pretty close, then we can move on to the next question. So are you getting some submissions, Dolores?
Absolutely. None there yet. Some close, but they're over, so can't count them.
Anybody getting close?
Yeah, but I don't think we should count him because he works for a grocery store.
Oh. Well, he should know.
He's pretty close. Do
Is it?
you want to use him, or do you want to use actually one of the other people?
Well, is it the person I'm thinking it is?
Works for Sobeys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you tell him I'll send him a profit wheel anyway.
Okay,
Because I keep
you
hearing
heard it, bud.
I keep hearing about all the good work he does for the producers and processors there, so I'll send him one anyway.
Okay, so yes, I do have someone. I will send you their name.
All right. What was their guess?
28,000.
28,000. That's pretty good. Yeah. So it's about 35,000 SKUs in the average conventional store. So so that's and it's always important to think about that. You know, that's how many different items the retailers are managing. They have to price them, they have to have inventory, they've got to go through the front end system properly, all kinds of different things. So it's a complex job managing 35,000 SKUs. Okay, we got one more question for you. This is question number 2. So what is most often the #1 SKU in the entire store? So again, a SKU is not milk. There's many SKUs within milk, you know, 2 liter, 1 liter, whatever. So what's the #1 SKU most often? I mean, some stores are unique, you know, different, but usually the #1 SKU in the store. And we'll have to eliminate that one person again, Dolores, because he probably knows the right answer to that one too.
Absolutely. But you know, it's funny, the first person who answered had it right.
No way.
Yeah.
So did they say bananas?
They did say bananas.
All right, so yes, usually bananas are the #1 selling SKU in a grocery store. And if you want to do some really kind of simple math, Usually, bananas are about 10% of produce sales, and usually produce is around 10% of the total store sales. So bananas are usually about 1% of the store sales. So if they'll tell you the banana sales, you get a pretty good idea what that total store is doing. So just a little bit of retail trivia, but so that's great. So we will send you a SKU food profit wheel, and you can use that to help calculate some margins and things going on in your business. So I hope that that helped you with that pricing kind of dilemma that sometimes, because it's hard. I get it. It's difficult to price your products, but you need to think about where you're going to fit within the category. So Dolores, what I'm going to do, we're going to do another poll here, and I'm going to go past the questions, but I'm going to just quickly ask the poll. So I'm curious how many of you are going to try that? How many of you are going to go in the store, have a look at the category, try to figure out where we're priced, relative, or how we should be priced relative to the competition, and then do that math to see if you can figure out what your selling price is. So if you want to put that poll up there, Dolores, then we can we'll get a sense of how many people sort of feel that that would be useful, I guess, in their business.
All right, sorry, the page just did something weird. So one
Uh-oh.
moment. Don't you love these things? Okay, launch. There you go.
There we are. So how many of you might try that category-based pricing method? So I'm interested. And if you didn't understand it, then by all means tell us that too, because it's important. It's not, it's not that sort of quick to go through that. So, and once you get some answers back, you can tell us, and then we can move on. And what we're going to talk about next, actually, just so you know where we're going, we'll just talk about some of the other things that you need to get on the shelf. We talked about how important that right price is, but it's not the only thing. So, so do you have some answers now, Dolores?
I do, absolutely. We have 68% of us have voted. I'll give you just a couple more seconds here, but you're sitting at 85% who said yes, but
85% said yes.
yes. So,
Wow.
all right, no more change in the voting, so I am just going to share it.
All right.
There you go.
Holy smokes, 85% yes, 10% said maybe, and a few people did not. And I'm always happy to talk to somebody about the pricing model. I really think that it's something, a way to help people. It doesn't guarantee success, not for sure, but it helps you understand sort of what's going to happen and how it's going to work. So I really hope that that's helpful to you and your businesses, and a tool that you can use going forward. It's not complicated math, just that retail times 1 minus the category margin. So not too complicated. So, all right, thanks, Dolores. I'm going to keep going, and we're going to keep on trucking with our content here. So in terms of that getting on the shelf, we talked about your price, but I also, you got to deliver quality. You have to be consistent. You've got to make sure that week in, week out, that your product delivers what the retailer expects it to deliver. And, I think sometimes categories get very crowded. There's a lot of hot sauce out there, for example. And I would tell you that somebody actually on the retail side said to me not that long ago, please, no more hot sauce. We're saturated. How can we get any different? So think about that when you're looking. If you're at the development stage, go in and have a look and understand that piece. Next thing is differentiate. So make sure within that category you're not going in and just being me too. So maybe some of you are familiar with Wise Bites, a product out of British Columbia, and they're cookies that are targeted mostly more for kids, but they're free from I believe it's the top 11 allergens. So that's real differentiation. So it's a way to be different within the category. And here's another example, which are products that are produced in New Brunswick, actually called Storm Chips. So, I mean, the chip category, it's a pretty tough category to compete in, right? This is covered bridge potato chips, and you're going up against some pretty big players in that category. So they came up with this line of Storm Chips, which are actually really just 4 flavors of chips put together in the same bag, and they kind of positioned them that said, you know what, if it's going to be a snowstorm in Atlantic Canada, you might as well just stay home and eat your Storm Chips. And they got a lot of publicity out of it, and believe it or not, what we used, and I'm sure you see this in Alberta, where they put the weather map out that says how many centimeters of snow you're going to get and that kind of thing. So here's a post that a radio station did that talked about how many cases of beer and how many bags of storm chips you're going to need to get through the next storm. So they kind of took the weather map thing and kind of had a little fun with it. So, you know, those are the kind of things. How do you differentiate within and be different and give something to talk about and get your name out there? So try to do those things. Another thing is service level. I mentioned it off the top, and I mentioned it as a, you know, something the retailers are really focused on, but it's really one of those things that you have to bring to the table. And it's something that, you know, I think retailers believe that regional processors can manage it better. And if you can, it can be a huge point of differentiation. We also need to bring proactive, innovative initiatives. And a lot of times when people talk to me about innovation, they say, you know, I've got this innovative process and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, wow, you know, that's interesting. But is there really value in that? Like, does the retailer see value in it? No, but it's a really consumer innovation. Okay, yeah. Are they going to pay? Like, do they see value in it? You might, but do they? So I'm going to give you an example of an innovation that the retailer would see value in. And I'm going to give you Tide Pods. So I'm sure you're familiar with Tide Pods. You've seen them all in the stores and everything. And we don't really have we're not going to do this as interactive as sometimes we might if I was in the same room. But I want you to think for a minute. Why do you think this is innovative to the retailer? Why do you think it is? And I'll tell you, when I ask that question, usually people go, oh, it takes less space on the shelf than liquid laundry detergent. Well, not, you know, maybe a little bit. But not really. And then they say, well, it's more sustainable packaging. It's not a big plastic bottle. Well, a little bit, but I'm not sure that this bag is 100% recyclable. They might prefer the bottle. You know, it's lighter than dragging around liquid. Well, yes, it is, but that's not the innovation that the retailer gets excited about. The innovation the retailer gets excited about is that when we sell Tide laundry detergent at, say, $5.99 for 28 wash loads, you may be one of those people who doesn't fill up the cup to that line. So you may be trying to get 30 wash loads out of your 28 wash load Tide. And if you think back to the retail price, and if I'm calculating that you're going to pay X pennies per laundry load, you're actually not paying that much. You're paying less. With Tide Pods, you can't do that. If this is a 28 pod bag, you're only getting 28 laundry loads out of that $5.99. So that's innovation to a retailer because they're making more sales and margin per load of laundry. And they go, wow, that's exciting to me. They don't care if it's, you know, winter fresh or whatever it is. Yeah, okay. The big thing is I can make more profit and more sales per load of laundry. If you think about that across all the loads of laundry that get done with people who shop at Sobeys or Safeway or wherever, it can add up to a lot. That's innovation that retailers really get excited about. So think about innovation, but think about it in terms of customers and consumers. Now, when you're doing all these things, I want you to think, though, you have to be great at execution. So I'm going to share a little story. A few years ago when we were traveling more, now we're traveling again, but before the pandemic, I was heading up to Ontario. I was doing some work for a company that had a juice, and we were taking samples up to the category manager. And I went to the airport in Halifax and went to check in at WestJet, and the supplier had packed the juice samples into a styrofoam cooler. So I get to the WestJet counter and I'm going to check in, and the fellow came over and he's like, oh, sorry, sir, we don't take those coolers as a check-in anymore. Because they have a habit of breaking in the cargo or where we put the suitcases. I'm like, okay. And he said, just go get a cardboard box and we'll take, we can tape it for you if you need anything. We'll take care of it. I said, okay. So I go down and if you've ever been in the airport in Halifax, we have a company called Clearwater here who export lobster all over the world. And they have a pack for travel store at the Halifax airport so you can take some lobster home with you. So I went in there and it's like 7:15 in the morning. And there's two women working there. And they're like this. And I'm like, morning, could I get one of your boxes that you pack the lobster in? I'd be happy to pay for it. I just need it because I had an issue and I need to get a cardboard box. And the woman looks at me and she goes, we don't sell the boxes. I said, well, whatever, if it's $10 or $15, I just need to get it. And then she goes, we don't sell the box. It has our brand on it. And I'm like, well, isn't the purpose that you want people to see your brand everywhere? Because now I'm starting to get mad, okay? And I know people like Clearwater. Seafood used to be one of my departments at Loblaw, but I'm like, okay, Peter, calm down, calm down. 7:15 in the morning, you don't need to get all wound up. So I turn around, I walk out. Across the hall is Hudson News. And so I went over there, and there was this person working at the counter. I always remember her name, Emily. And I don't know about you, but for me, Hudson News has always been sort of like the home of a $5 pack of gum and a $15 magazine, right? That was kind of what Hudson News was to me. But I went in and I explained my little dilemma to her, and she's like, "Oh, sure, we've got cardboard boxes. We just took some down to the compactor. We'll get one for you." So she called somebody. They brought a box up. It was perfect. Put the juice and the refrigerated packs in and whatever. She said, "Oh, here's some tape. I got some tape." So she helped me tape it all up. And then she's like, "Oh, you need to put your name on it. Here's a marker," and wrote my name and everything. So that was great. I went back to WestJet, checked my box into, and I went through security, and I'm sitting at the gate waiting to get on the plane, and I'm thinking, Peter, you should do the right thing. You should send an email to Hudson News and just, explain what happened, right? Because she was really nice. She kind of turned it, I was having a crappy morning, and she turned it around for me. So I sent a little email, just explain what happened. And within seconds, I got an email back. And it wasn't a form email, those kind of form emails you get. It was like, Peter, thanks for sharing your experience at the Halifax airport with Emily. It's obvious that Emily did a great job sharing how we want our brand experience to be in the market. And we define it as being the traveler's best friend. And I was thinking, oh, wow, kind of sitting there, a little tear in my eye, and I'm like, the traveler's best friend. Wow, I never thought about that as Hudson News. So you see, Emily did a fantastic job of really helping me get a sense of how they want their brand to interact with people. So you need to do the same thing with your brand. You need to make sure that you're delivering all these things to the retailers, because you're the face of that brand to the retailer, to the customer, to your customers. So make sure that you're doing that interaction and really make sure that your brand and your brand story is being told the way that it should be, because it's really important that you do execute, and you have to execute it all the time, 52 weeks of the year. And that day, Emily certainly did for me. So what else do you need to get on the shelf? You need a sales plan, and I told you we were going to talk about that. So you need to know how to get your products selling. And anytime that you go in and you start to think, okay, I'm going to do something in sales and marketing, and especially on the consumer side, the first thing you need to do is you need to, and this was told to me by a good CPG person who worked years and years for McCain's and different companies. The first thing you need to do is create awareness. If you're going to make an investment in something, create awareness. The second thing it needs to do, the same investment, it needs to change attitudes. And the third thing is it needs to influence behaviors. So if you can create awareness, change attitudes, and influence behavior, then you are going to be successful. And influence behavior is getting that product into the shopping cart. And that is so important. So important. So if you're going to make any investments in that, trade marketing or marketing spend where you're talking direct to consumers, make sure you're creating awareness, you're changing attitudes, and you're influencing behaviors. The next thing is, when you're doing these things, you really need to think about A/B testing. So it's not a difficult concept. It's A is one thing. So if you look at my model, I'm going back to that cheese example again. A was doing a buy one, get one free ad with Sobeys. B was doing a $3.99 ad. Measure the results, see what happens. And if you're at the point in your business where you're in the Sobeys local program or you're in 250 stores, you have to test the results, see what happens, make the investment, and then see what happens with the results. So important. Another thing is you need to think about your baseline sales, and baseline sales are that sort of sales per store per week kind of thing. And what does your item do? What is the volume that your item sells? And so important that you know what that number is, because anytime you make an investment in trade spend or marketing spend, are you driving the baseline up? Is your average 50 units a week and then it went to 52? If you were average 50 and you made an investment and you averaged 50 after, then it really didn't pay off for you. So you got to make sure you're measuring those baseline sales. All right, we're going to do another interactive thing here. So hopefully Dolores and Marguerite, you guys are ready. So this time we're going to give you, the winner will get one of our SKU Food shopping carts. And we use the shopping cart as sort of a, that sort of symbol that we want to remind you always, you got to get your products into the shopping cart. So the person who gets the right answer this time, we will package up one of our SKU Food shopping carts and send it out to you. And as a reminder that you need to get your products into that shopping cart. So what we're going to ask you is, we said that in the average store, there are about 35,000 SKUs. So in a year, in a whole year, how many different SKUs does the average household buy? And this is a number that came from Catalina Marketing, where they analyzed millions of front-end transactions. And so how many different SKUs does the average household buy out of that 35,000? And we'll do it the same way, Dolores, where we'll say, whoever's closest, but not over. So hopefully you're getting some people entering some numbers there, are you?
I am. We either have really low or really high.
Really? What's some
Oh,
of the
there's
high ones?
1,000,
Oh
10,000,
my word!
22,000.
Wouldn't we love to? I would have probably had a nicer car and a bigger house if people had bought 1,000 different SKUs in a year
Okay,
from when I worked at.
yeah. We have one that is 10 under, so
Oh, I think that's pretty close.
I think so. I think so. Yeah, nobody else is close. All right, so we do have a winner here.
Okay, so out of that 35,000 SKUs in the average store, the average household buys only 260 different SKUs in a year. We are creatures of habit. We find things we like and we continue to go back to them. So you have to remember, as a supplier, that's how difficult it is to get people to switch to what you're trying to do, or get them to notice you, or that kind of thing. So you have to work at this stuff all the time to make sure that you're getting the notice and the awareness, so people are making the switch to your product. So only 260 different SKUs across the whole store, which is like less than 1%. So all that work the retailer's doing and that suppliers are doing to get their products in there, it's crazy how now the 260 that one household buys is different than the 260 another one buys, and different than the 260 another one buys, but that's how low the number is. So if we could get the person's address on that one, and then we will send you a SKU Food shopping cart, and you will be able to put that on your desk and remind yourself just how important it is to get those products into the shopping cart. So let's talk about that sales plan. And the first component is trade spend. So trade spend is the money that a supplier invests with the retailer. And so the first one, kind of an obvious one, is the ad. So you discount your product, your selling price to be in the ad, and it drives volume. And hopefully, if it's the right item, it drives consumers into that retailer store. So that's one form of trade spend. Another one is in-store specials. So this is where you will discount your product for a specific period of time. Usually it's sort of 3 to 5 weeks, depending on the retailer, and they will reduce the price on the shelf, and your product will get a sign. And that sign is very important, because that's a lot of what will drive sales, because consumers will notice it and go, oh, it's on sale. And the whole multi-buy concept has definitely brought some incremental volume to people, where if you can convince people to buy 2 or 3 or whatever, then that drives some volume. And each of the retailers have their own program. If you sell to Walmart, they call them rollbacks. If you sell to Loblaws, they call them an in-store program. If you sell to Sobeys, it's a save cycle, but it's really the same concept. So a temporary reduction in the price to try to drive volume. Loyalty programs, another form of trade spend, where the retailers have their programs. If it's Loblaw, it's PC Optimum. If it's Sobeys, it's Scene Points. Walmart would say, we don't have a loyalty program, we have Price. So another way, though, that you can invest with points to try and get you get a sign on your product and drive some volume and try to grow that baseline. Demos, another way that you can grow volume with the retailer doing a sampling in the store. Some of them, it depends on their program, how they want to operate, but certainly demos are another way that you can invest with the retailer to try to drive volume and grow that baseline. signage or point of sale signage, POS. I think that's another term in our glossary. Those are other options for you. If you're a big national brand, they're going to charge you more. If you're a smaller regional player, then you can maybe talk to them and say, hey, you know, can we do something, and see whether there's a way to work something out. Another form of trade spend is themes or over and above space. So if you want to be in the holiday, you know, the picture I have here is sort of a holiday cracker kind of display. So if you want to be a part of that program, then sometimes the retailers will bundle that with ads and say, okay, we'll you know, there's a price, and you can be a part of that program and get some extra space. And you know, usually for me, I think 80% of the volume usually still gets done in your sort of regular location where you're kept in the store, but you can get a 20% sort of number going with incremental space, which can be valuable to you. Rebates is another form of trade spend. Now, usually this is more in the perishable departments where the more commodity type items, where the retailer will say, okay, we're going to have 3 or 4 different suppliers on broccoli or onions or something like that, and we're going to deduct, say, 3 or 5 or a certain percentage, and that's kind of the cost of doing business. It's what, you know, for them to put it in the ad and do the things that the retailer does. So that's another form of trade spend. Another one is listing fees. So this is can be a more contentious one because it's you know, that fee that you pay to get on the shelf, and there's no set kind of price list for listing fees. It's very much different depending on the category, depending even what the retailer sees your ability to pay. And if you're a large multinational company, they think you have a lot more money than somebody who wants a regional listing. But the retailers, most of them will charge listing fees for companies who want to be sort of regional or bigger. If it's the local program, then this doesn't usually apply, but regional or bigger, then listing fees will apply. So it's something that people have to consider. If you're selling more into the specialty channels, a lot of the retailers there will say, okay, we're going to do a free fill. And a free fill would be 1 case per SKU per store for free, and that's their version of listing fees. So there's different costs to get to the shelf. Another form of trade spend is trade shows, where you make an investment and go out, and some of the retailers have their own trade shows where they want you to participate and be there, and maybe with their store managers and things like that. So that's another form of trade spend, which is important for people to budget and plan for. So I'm curious, and Dolores, if we could do another poll now, or just I'm curious as to what trade spend people are doing now. Are they implementing some of those or not? So we put some different options for you. We can't list them all, but we're just wondering, you know, are you doing ads? Are you doing any in-store specials? Are you doing loyalty programs, demos, anything else that you're doing? So really interested to see what people, if any, kind of trade spend that they are doing. So hopefully you are doing some investment because your customers, the retailers, are expecting that you're going to be making some investments with them to drive volume and grow that baseline. And it is one way that you can do that. And one thing I didn't say while people are voting here is, you know, think of it as an investment. And when you make an investment in your private life with your finances, if you make an investment, you expect a return. So when you're doing trade spend or marketing spend, which we're going to talk about in a minute, you have to measure that return. You have to say, did we do more volume during the promo? That's the first question. And then the second question is, did we grow our baseline sales? And you know, that's a really, that's the key. If you can grow the baseline, then it's working for you. So Dolores, are you getting some votes in there?
You bet.
All
I
right,
am going
good.
to share your results there.
All right. All right. So we've got 1/3 of the people doing ads, 42% doing in stores, only 15 doing loyalty. That's interesting. And 80% doing demos. People love demos. I would argue with you on the demos. I'm not sure it's your best investment, but we don't have time to get into that argument today. And then we've got 15% doing other things, and there are other options for sure. So, but I think in-store specials can be a very valuable tool depending on the size of your business and that kind of thing. So interesting, but it's good to see that people are making some of those investments, because the reality is, I didn't put this number in the presentation, but I can tell you from AC Nielsen that About 36, this was in one of their state of the industry reports. This goes back a couple of years, but 36% of sales and 48% of tonnage were going through at what we call temporary price reduction. So some form of discount, either part of the loyalty program or an in-store or an ad or something. So, you know, consumers do notice it, and probably your competitors are doing it. So you have to plan for it. So let's talk about, and I'm going to go past the questions, but we'll have time for questions at the end. So I just want to get through this, and then we'll make sure we have time at the end for questions. So marketing spend. So marketing spend for me, my definition of that would be the money that suppliers invest talking directly to the consumer. So trade spend is the money you invest with the retailer. Marketing spend is the money that you invest talking direct to the consumer. And an example of that is social media, where you have a, you know, you do paid ads, or you do have an online community or whatever it is, and you're speaking direct to the consumer. Hey, this is what we're doing, and or where you can find us or whatever. So let's explore some of them. Obviously, I just talked about social media. Now, I think that, you know, it's a very crowded space. It's hard to be good in social media. And remember, social media is meant to be a two-way conversation. If all you're doing is blasting stuff out all the time, then it's probably not that effective for you. And if you think about it, if you and I were having a conversation and all I did was keep talking to you about me, and I start, you know, with this is where I grew up and this is where I worked and this blah, 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 and, blah, 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 and I never gave you a chance, you'd probably not be very interested in the conversation. So think about your social media as a two-way conversation. You know, give people value in it, you know, whether that's recipes or, you know, you can see there's one they're promoting on the right there that, you know, it's on sale at Sobeys. So you're showing them some value and that kind of thing. So try to communicate with people on social media. So you can use influencers. So the guy on the left is not the influencer, that's me. With my glasses on, but the other person there is a person who's quite well known here in Atlantic Canada, Chef Alain Bossé, otherwise known as the Kilted Chef. And so he does a lot of work in the food space with different brands. Alain and I do some work together. We have a great time working together. We talk to people, we talk to audiences about you know, how to eat differently, how to save money in the grocery store, and different things like that. But he really has built a huge online community of people who are interested in food. So look for influencers. They can be a great asset in your marketing spend. Your website. So, you know, this is usually the foundation of your digital strategy, the website. So make sure that it's up to date and it's fresh and it's informative. And remember, your retailer customers are going to go here too. It's not just the consumers. The retailers will check you out. So your website is an important piece. Mass media, another thing that we don't hear about as much anymore. You know, people go radio, television, newspaper, you know, those kind of, you know, those were the 80s and the 90s, but they can be effective tools for you to communicate with specific demographics and that kind of thing. So if your product is something that appeals to the people who watch the 5 o'clock news, of which, you know, sort of the CTV regional networks or maybe CBC, whatever it is, they have a pretty good following of a certain demographic who watch those shows. So, and on the screen, you see a program that actually Food and Beverage Atlantic did here, where they worked with CTV and they have different processors, and they do a little recipe on the 5 o'clock news, and it really moved a lot of cases. It was impressive to me. The product you see there is Shivani's Kitchen butter chicken, and it really was very effective at moving cases, and that's what this is about, right? So your packaging, another piece of marketing spend where you really need to focus a lot and think about it, you know, sort of that billboard mentality where people have a limited time to really be able to catch the message. So one of my clients one time when we were talking about packaging, and I thought this was very insightful, he said to me, Peter, I want our packaging to have a conversation with the consumer. And I thought that was very insightful because, you know, a lot of times we just scream something at them as opposed to engaging them and getting them to kind of almost go back and forth. So think about that. That's why I put the pictures of the berries up there. That was something we saw actually at a show in Europe, and I thought it was interesting because they kind of are talking as though the berries are almost have a personality. You know, I'm healthy, that kind of thing. Now in the bottom left, you see a different photo there. So that's somebody who didn't pay a lot of attention to packaging. So the retailer's merchandising that product on its side, and that package is not saying much to me. So think about how your product's going to be merchandised. There's a lot of regulatory issues around packaging, big issue. But if you get it right, you have a much better chance to get onto the shelf. Another thing is public relations, and I think for regional brands, this is a totally underutilized space. You know, I think a lot of you have a good news story to tell. As I told you right off the top, people are more interested in food these days. So be proactive about telling your story. And it's not just on social media, but see, could you do something on the morning show or whatever? And you're not going to get it all the time, but when you have something newsworthy, because remember, they're selling news and they got to keep people entertained, then you need to be proactive about saying, hey, we could come along and we actually have a chef who works with us. We could do a little recipe and we could tell you about something. We've hired 50 new people, or I don't know what it is, but you can use public relations more effectively to get your word out. And again, it's a lot of times on mass media, but they have big followings sometimes that can be very effective for you. And point of sale. So I talked about point of sale as a trade spend option where you can invest with the retailer, but there's also point of sale where, depending on the channel you're in, you can do some things. And as a former retailer, I would tell you that the shelf is one of the most effective places for you to promote. So I put a couple examples. One is a kombucha company out of New Brunswick. So you can see the little shelf flag there. So their production facility is totally run on solar power. So they are, you know, promoting that as a point of differentiation. So they went with that little shelf tag. And the company on the right is called the Hand Pie Company from Prince Edward Island, and that's a floor decal. And that, you know, I kind of think, oh, that's a little bit dated, but some of these things, you know, the retro thing, I guess, it actually worked. I was in a specialty store, I'm walking through, and I'm like, oh, holy smokes, the Hand Pie! I didn't know they were here, and I look, and there they are. So it can be effective to get people's attention. So think of different things at that point of sale, POS. And another thing is sponsorship. So I'm not a huge fan of this. I think, you know, sometimes within a community, we're asked to do certain things, and I understand that. But I also want to try to say, okay, if I'm going to do sponsorship, I'm going to try to understand kind of what's in it for me. You know, am I able to sell some cases? Am I able to tie it in somehow or something? So, you know, $1,000 to put my logo on the board at the rinks, I don't know if that's the best return on your investment, but, you know, that's just my opinion. And consumer shows, another thing where marketing spend, where you can invest. And here I'm using the cheese example again, just because I had some photos of it, but they have some big shows here in Atlantic Canada where consumers go around and you know, sometimes it's a little bit of a gift thing or whatever, but it can be a great place to interact with certain demographics. So consumer shows are another opportunity for that sort of marketing spend. So I'm curious, and Dolores, we're going to do, I think it's our last poll. Are people doing any of these things? Which pieces of that marketing spend component are you doing in your business now? Are you doing social media? Are you doing any mass media? Doing any POS, public relations? I'm hoping to see some on that public relations line after I talked about it like that. And there are other options too. So, but one thing I would say, and I'm sure when we look at the results, we're going to see over 90% of the people are going to tell us that they do social media. So remember, everybody's doing it. So how do you stand out? How do you make yours unique, different, worthwhile? And the other thing I would tell you is that when you go in and talk to your customer, to the retailer, you can't just say, we're going to do social media, because they're going to think in their mind, or they might even say it to you, yeah, so is everybody else. The last 15 people who've been in my office said the same thing. So, you know, how are you going to be different about it, and that kind of thing. So that's the key question for me, is how are you going to be different about it? So we have some results, Dolores. I see that the screen is flashing.
There they are. Yeah.
All right, so 94% of them doing social media. I knew it. So hopefully you're working hard at it to be different and have that interaction. Really low number on mass media. So I understand the cost. There's definitely an expense to it, but sometimes for some brands, it can be very effective. So just take a look and see if you find an opportunity. A third of the people doing signage or POS, yep, for sure. And wow, almost 40% doing public relations. So that's fantastic. I think that's a great opportunity for you to grow your business and get some more exposure. So thanks, and we appreciate everybody who's been participating in the polls. It's great to kind of get some interaction going, although we can't sort of talk to each other and see each other and that kind of thing. It's great to get that interaction going, and I really hope you're considering all those different options for trade spend and marketing spend, because the reality is you need to make investments to drive sales in your business. So that's so important. When you go to talk about getting on the shelf with a retailer, you need to say, here's our plan. Here's what we're going to be focused on. In January, it's this. In February, it's that. In March, it's that. And I know it's not as exciting as developing and going to plant trials and doing those things, but it's important. It's part of what you have to do to really make sure that you operate your business properly. So the other thing I would share with you just on the sort of trade spend and marketing spend piece is do what they can't do. So if you're not a multinational company, you can't afford to do some of the things that you see in the stores. But look for things that those companies can't do. So a couple examples here on the telling the story about their products. So Java Blend is a coffee company based in Nova Scotia, and I'm not sure everybody's going to read all that typed out there, but I think that they're trying to do a job of telling their story. On the right is a company called Big Cove Spices, and they've been able to get their products positioned right behind the service meat counter at Sobeys. So they're not going to go toe to toe with McCormick's or whoever the spice supplier is that Sobeys use. They've got themselves over by the meat department, and the people working in service meat know about Big Cove Spices. So if you're a consumer who goes up and buys a premium steak or something out of the service counter, the meat people will say, hey, have you seen these spices and they're great spices, whatever. So try to do what the big players can't do. And I think a lot of times that will pay dividends for you as you work hard to get your product on the shelf. So maybe we'll take a break there, Dolores, and I have a few things to wrap up, but I'm sure maybe you've got some more questions, and we'll take a few minutes to take a look at some of them.
You're going to need lots of minutes to take them.
We might have to write them down and send out answers or something.
I think so. So the first one, it starts out, it's got just little statements with questions and then a thing following through. So trade spend benchmarks, percent of revised budget, specific strategies, scan, off invoice, flyer, loyalty. Here's the question. How to think about private label. We're a manufacturer and being approached by retailers for PL of similar products to our core items.
Mm-hmm. Well, congratulations first, because I think that's a real compliment when the retailers are coming to you and saying, hey, we're interested, we see what you're doing, and we think that we'd like to have that as part of our private label program. So first of all, take that moment to give yourself a pat on the back, because it doesn't always happen, right? So I think there's not a, and I always say to people about private label, and some people would use the term control label, interchangeable, that there's no right or wrong answer to that question. But you do need to have an answer if they come to you. So you need to look at your business and say, do we have excess capacity? And right now, doing our branded program, if our plant is only running 2 days a week, if we could get the private label business, we might get it up to 4 days a week, and all of a sudden the efficiencies would change. And there's lots of companies who produce branded and private label. You don't have to be 100% one way or 100% the other way. You can do both. You can also say to the retailer, we want to keep our branded listing in your store. If you're going to do a private label, then you need to guarantee us or say to us that you're going to keep us there for at least 24 months or something like that. Now, if you're the type of person who loves to make things, but you're really not into all this trade spend and marketing spend, and you find it a drudgery, then you know what, maybe private label is really good for you, because you could say, you know what, I don't need to build a brand, I don't need to do all that stuff, I'm going to produce private label, and the retailer is more going to do all that stuff for me. So there's never a right or wrong answer to it, but I think you always have to think it through. But again, take the time to congratulate yourself that they're asking.
All right. So multiple areas on this next question, so I'll break it down in smaller parts. Do consumers care about local ingredients, not products, just the ingredients? And allergens.
So okay, so yes, they care about local ingredients, but I think we have to do a great job of explaining that. Do they care
Okay.
about allergens? Only if it affects them. So that's where you need to do your homework and say how many people are, gluten intolerant, or, and I know lactose is not an allergy, but how many people need lactose free, and if it's a specific like nuts or something. You can find a lot of those numbers, but then you need to say, okay, if I'm going to focus on peanut free, it's going to be 11% of the market. And you need to think about how that starts to narrow your market down.
All right, so this next question is taking your glossary words into account because I have no idea. Where can you track down the ABV regulations by category for RTDs?
um, you probably have to pay for them.
All right, that was an easy answer. Okay, when going through the warehouse, how much margin does the warehouse want on top of the 30% for the retailer?
Yeah, that's unique by retailer. Some retailers you look at their warehouse more as a profit center than others. So I think that the answer to that is it depends on the retailer. And I would say the range you would probably go would be from 0 up to probably about 10%.
Okay. Is it best to pitch retailers during category reviews? If so, how can we find out when it's taking place?
Right. So that's one thing Range Me does, that you can find that sometimes. The retailers will list when they are doing category reviews on Range Me. If you don't have, if they don't share it or you're not on there, then you really have to ask them. And it's hard to get their attention sometimes, but it's not really, to my knowledge, I don't think it's published anywhere. If you're an existing supplier, a lot of the retailers have what they call a supplier portal where that information will be shared. But if you're not an existing supplier, then you really have to find somebody from the company and get that information.
All right. And which are the information sources in the beverage industry, non-alcoholic?
Information sources, I think you definitely need to be looking at the trade magazines that start at the sort of the global level, like sort of Canadian Grocer, Grocery Business, and then there are certain ones that are specific for that category, which usually tend to be more American than Canadian, but you can glean good stuff out of it for both. And a lot of times, Europe as well, depends on where you are and which part of the category you're in. Like if you're in the sort of non-alcoholic, alcohol replacement kind of category, Europe is much more advanced than we are. So I would go over there and look at the trade information you could get there.
All right. How can you influence shelf placement on liquor shelves?
um, I find it interesting because, of course, in Nova Scotia, our beverage alcohol is only through the provincially owned liquor stores, and I know in Alberta it's different. So I'm not as sort of well versed in that. I think my going in position would be that you need to develop that relationship with the category manager, and you need to focus on the points of differentiation. And points of differentiation, it's not local, but if you're local, why or how are you different? Now that may be where you could talk about local ingredients or something like that. But just being produced locally is not always enough of a point of differentiation.
Okay. Do you hear of vendors having a false sense of product value coming from the higher priced farmers markets and then transitioning to grocery shelves, where it can be much more of a volume game as opposed to a niche homegrown market?
Right. Yep. No, it's an interesting question, and the short answer would be yes, but I'll give you a little more context to it. I think we have to always remember the value the consumer places on a product can differ by where they're buying it. So if a consumer goes to a farmer's market, they are getting an experience. They're getting a lot of times to talk to the person who actually made or produced the product. They get the story of the product. They probably get to try it. It's a very different buying experience for them. And I think that in a lot of cases, they don't mind, paying a little more, but it doesn't mean that that same product, if you take it and you put it on a grocery store shelf where it's surrounded by different products that are competing with different attributes. Some could be price, but other attributes too. The value that the consumer places on it is very different. And I think it's the same thing if you know, and a lot of times we get sort of tunnel vision because we're in this industry, but think about clothes or something like that. If you think of clothes shopping at a high-end store where they're gonna take you to the dressing room and give you a glass of wine, you're gonna expect you're gonna pay more than if you kind of got to search through everything on the rack and find your size and that kind of thing. So I think what people have to do with farmers market is can be a fantastic place to test things and learn about consumer behavior and learn about, you know, how they interact with your product and use your product. But you can't say they're willing to pay $9 there, they're going to pay $9 at the grocery store, because it's a different buying environment.
Okay, what is the best MOQ for a startup beverage company trying to grow their brand?
Okay, you're starting to get me now. I was trying to keep up on these terms. MOQ.
Yep, that's all I have. Sorry.
Read it again.
Oh, shoot, I just
Oh,
scrolled past it. Hang on, I'm going back.
all right.
What is the best MOQ for a startup beverage company trying to grow their brand?
I think the person might have to define that one for me, and I'm going to have to add that to my glossary of terms.
All right. Hey, maybe you learned something today.
I'm always learning stuff.
And there was a little joke about your wheel. Aren't those the same wheels the doctor uses to calculate your due date?
Oh, no, it's not the same wheel. I'm not that qualified.
No. How does that model of pricing take into account pricing fairness? For example, when we are working with all the different retailers, wouldn't it be best to have our FOB selling price be close or similar across all the banners?
Yes, you need to keep it a level playing field is the way that I would describe it. Now, some retailers are more expensive to deal with than others. Some are going to expect a higher amount of trade spend and that kind of thing. And I think that, you know, our method, it's one piece of the puzzle to how to properly price your product. And it's not the only thing you need to think about, but it's one way, one consideration when you're pricing your product. So if a discount store is going to retail your product cheaper, does that mean you should sell it to them cheaper? You know, maybe not. Are they more efficient to deal with? Can you ship full pallet quantities into them, and the other store, you know, are they going to only order 10 cases at a time? Well, if that's so, then maybe it is right to be a little cheaper into the discount. So I think you have to factor a lot of those things into it.
Okay. I'm not sure if we can answer this. What about a product like jerk sauce that is not very popular in Alberta? Not sure what the question is.
Well, I think that's the kind of thing where you're going to have to explain the value to the consumer if they haven't tried it. And sometimes we also have to accept, you know, that's where a farmer's market can be a great asset, because you can try it. And if you get 100 people and only 2 of them go, oh, I love it, then you go, okay, maybe I haven't hit the, you know, the right space here from a consumer perspective. It may be something you love, it may be something that you're familiar with, but it has to be, you have to be able to kind of generate and get that size of the market kind of thing.
Right. Okay. For the US market, do you also need to include delivered price, or can the delivery cost be extra if selling?
Oh no, they're always going to want delivered. Retailers
Okay.
don't want to get into all that.
Okay, hang on. If the SKUs per household number different, oh, okay, is the SKUs per household number different in different areas, countries?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, the one I have that number that I found from Catalina Marketing out of, you know, a lot of front end data information that they surveyed in North America, but I don't know if it changes by market.
All right, and just a comment here. Someone's not sure if the I am healthy label that you showed on the thing, is that even allowed in Canada?
Yeah, that's a good question. As I mentioned, we did see that in Europe. That's a good question. And for sure, you need to be within that regulatory piece, and certainly Health Canada have, something to say about all those things. So yeah, I think that's a good comment. Yep.
All right.
I'm gonna have to put that caveat in now when I show that photo.
And how do retailers feel about the sales rep going to the store and merchandising their own product? Do pre-arrangements need to be made with the store manager to do this?
Yeah, great question. I think that, as I mentioned, you need to have retail coverage. That relationship has to be built over time. You always have to respect that that is their store, and you need to position your, the reason you're there is to support what they're trying to do. So if your business has negotiated with the retailer that, on the May long weekend, we're going to do a promo and we're going to do some extra merchandising, then, you can, maybe set up the time when the store is going to be doing that merchandising if you want to go in and help. So you have to be a support role. You can't go in and say, hey, we're supposed to have 50 cases on this end and you're messing up, and that kind of thing. So it's about the relationship. And there's some people who are fantastic at it. When you have good people at retail who have good relationships with the stores, with the store manager, the department manager, it can be really, really valuable to you. But again, it has to be supporting their position, not going in and sort of telling them, well, I'm supposed to have this, so I need it.
All right. So I found out what MOQ stands for.
Okay.
Minimum order quantity.
Oh, I should have known that. I should know that one.
So do you want me to ask you the question again
Yeah,
now?
you better ask me the question again.
What's the best MOQ for a startup beverage company trying to grow their brand?
Okay, so minimum order quantity. All right, so that's always a challenge. So what you want to do, I think you want to go in and try and understand the holding capacity of the customers that you're going to be selling. So if you're going to be selling into a specialty channel where it's limited store size, limited shelf space, you go and you look and you say, okay, they have room for 8 bottles on the shelf, and they might have room for 2 cases out back. So, and if your case pack is 8, then that's room for 3 cases. So, and then you want to look and say, okay, how fast is that going to turn, and how many times do you want to be in that store? So you have to do the kind of assess all those things and then figure out what that minimum order quantity is. So it's no real, like, I can't say to you, you should tell them it's 5 cases. I think what you need to do is look and say, okay, what's the holding power? And then how often can I get to that store based on the sales estimate that we have? And based on those 3 things, then you can figure out what that minimum order quantity is.
Perfect. Now we have reached our time here, Peter. So if
Yeah.
you want to just wrap it up, we have more questions. We will give all those questions to Peter. He will give us wonderful answers, and we will respond to all of them through an email that will probably go out probably Tuesday.
Yep. No, that'd be great, Dolores. And I think it's fun. I'm so happy we got so many questions. I can't believe I didn't clue into MOQ. That's a little bit, embarrassing here at the end. And I don't think it's on our glossary, so I will definitely add that one in. We might have to give that person credit for stumping me on that one. So, and definitely in respect of people's time, we want to wrap up. I was going to share, and I will share this in like 30 seconds. This is a vendor who, when I looked after lawn and garden for Loblaw, we actually went to this vendor to delist their products, and we were rationalizing our listing base with vendors. And when we went into the greenhouse, we saw these terrible old dilapidated greenhouses, and then we saw these beautiful products that we were like, wow, that's phenomenal. And then when we talked to them, they explained to us the relevance of the products they were growing and how they were doing mixes together in hanging baskets that were right for today's consumer. And then they talked about, how they could reduce deliveries and give us more value into our program. And then they said to us, here's the sales plan that we think would work the best, and here's how we think you can grow your volume by 15, 20%. And we were like, wow, I mean, these people really have it together. And there's more to the story, but if you were to go back to their greenhouse today, this is what you would see. So there is room in the market for people who really understand and make sure that you're delivering an offering to the retailer and the consumer, not just the consumer, but to the retailer and the consumer, that is relevant to what's going on in our industry today. Make sure you got value within the category. They're making that purchase decision right there within. If you think back to that salad dressing category, they're making the decision right there. And that you have that sales plan built for your products, because it's your job to make sure that those products sell. So I really appreciate the time with everybody today. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. Thank you for all the questions and participating with our polls. We'll get the profit wheels and the shopping carts out. And also big thanks to Dolores and Marguerite for helping and keeping everything on the rails and the way it should be. So thanks very much for your time. And it's been great to be here with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Peter, for sharing. Oh my gosh, so much information today. You are one smart gentleman. So to everybody
It's
else
more
here,
about experience.
so you'll receive a short survey at the end of this webinar. Your comments will help us determine where we should be going with the future, what you thought of Peter and everything. So it'll take you just a couple minutes. I would really appreciate it. And just to let you know, we have 2 more webinars coming up. The first one is on tips on staying on the right side of social media and creating ambassadors on February the 22nd. And the second one is on communication, the crucial but often missing ingredient in a successful relationship with partners along the supply chain. That's on March the 8th. I will include the registration link to both of those webinars in our email that we send out following this, this webinar. Thank you everyone for spending your afternoon with us. Greatly appreciated. Have a great day, everyone.